Oh, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Josh. This is Alex. It's Art Jam. It's time.
Hello. Welcome back, Josh.
Yeah, it's been a
Welcome back
while.
to you.
Several weeks.
It's been what? How many months ago was that? It
Six,
was what
six
month are we in?
weeks.
We're in September,
Yeah, so it would have
and that
been early
started end of
August.
July.
hmm
Crazy,
It's been a while.
but you survived.
I made it. I made a film. I completed the Unreal Fellowship. I feel pretty good about myself.
Yeah,
And it's quite it's like a full experience, that thing, the Fellowship. Like, you're fully absorbed in it for a while. It's fun. It's really fun.
yeah.
But
I mean, I
it's
think it starts off casual because you don't know what you're going to do, and you're
Yeah.
just kind of chill. And then, like, I think the closer you get to the end, the more intense it gets.
hmm
But I guess that's like anything. That's like any deadline.
Yeah, as the closer you get to the deadline, you're like, oh, I don't know how much I can finish. Like, about halfway in, I did like an animatic, which I remember sending to you, and I was like,
Mhm.
there's no way I can finish all of this. There's no way I can finish all of this. I have to cut half of this at least.
Yeah, and it's like I had the same thing, and it's just in hindsight, like what was I thinking to come up with what
hmm
I initially came up with? But I guess you don't know.
Yeah, at a certain point, you're like, I don't know if this is really gonna. There's no way I can do this like to the way that the quality that I want. But
Yeah. But was your idea something that you had had in the past, or did you completely come up with it like on the spot?
it kind of evolved. Like, there was some ideas that I had. Um, I have, like, on my phone, like, I have like a in the notes app or whatever. I have a bunch of folders that I just do little bits and bobs of like writing. So
Uh-huh.
I'll put like ideas for a story here, or a campaign, or a world building thing, and so I kind of just dove into that a little bit and dragged out some of that stuff. Of basically, like, this is an area that I would be interested in. I knew that there were certain things I didn't really want to focus on. Like, I didn't really want to focus on uh, a, a dialogue driven short. We'll show the short, I guess, here in a little bit, but
Hmm.
I didn't want to focus on that, and I wanted to just kind of explore world building, like
Yeah.
world building, cinematography, environment work, and that's because I don't really do that stuff very often. So
Hmm.
this was like this was like a really good chance for me to try that, like something
Yeah.
I'm not really. It's not my forte. Um, so I wanted to do something different than I normally did, and that was like the perfect opportunity for that, to try that. So yeah, it was kind of fun. But yeah, as far as the ideas were concerned, uh, I ended up. I'll actually just show my screen in a minute and walk you through like the first piece of storyboards that I did, which are pretty rough, and they actually aren't really storyboards at all. They're kind of just like idea
Hmm.
boards.
But like
Um,
blocked out in 3D or drawn?
they were all drawn.
Okay.
They were all drawn, and then I just like the initial. I'll just show you. I'll share my screen and I'll start there.
Okay.
We'll do. What will we do? This one? Sure.
Cool.
We'll do this one. So this is just like the first thing that I wanted was I had an idea for my short that the very beginning would be like a thin line, basically, that you would just see a line, and I wanted to start with like a graphic element of that, of basically being in between two planets, or in between like in an asteroid or something, and that there
Okay.
would be some light in there. And so eventually you would kind of zoom in on this, and then a ship would arrive. And I thought maybe this would be like where the title would go. So that the title of my short is called Wardens.
Yeah.
And then eventually the idea was that there would be like this rotation inside of this, is where the storyboards go awry very quickly. But it kind of rotated, and that you would kind of see a change in perspective, and that there would be something in the distance that the ship would go land on, and then you would kind of have this landing moment, and the
Yeah.
character would basically walk through these some epic shots, some stuff that I had found on Instagram, and
Hmm.
stuff like that, to kind of get this approaching this area. I had thought about the idea of having, some littered bodies, corpses, ships, and stuff on the way there,
Yeah.
uh, and then just kind of taking some ideas of getting into this area, and then entering. There was a really large robot at the end of my short, which I ended up cutting completely. But it was kind of just this traversal of like going through this
Yeah.
space and getting there. And that
So
was
this is
kind
what you
of where it
showed in
started.
like the scrummed with the team in the
Yeah.
beginning, just to pitch what you were going to do.
Yeah, this was the like this is what I think I want to do generally as far as
Mhm.
like the sets, the
Yeah.
locations, how many characters there will be, if there would be any dialogue.
Yeah.
So, and that was where I basically started trying to go through the marketplace, go through Kit Bash, go through Big Small Medium, like any area that could sell
Yeah.
or have assets that I could take. So I ended up finding a Paragon character that had a cape and a hood. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, like this is perfect. This is exactly what I want for that. But then each one of the things I picked, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do a Paragon character, I knew I wanted cloth, like you can see in my the very little character reference I had. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted that cape thing, and I was like searching for what would be the best thing that would do that, because I knew I wasn't going to have time to like set up a cloth sim on the
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
And so I found one that ended up working, which was cool. And yeah, this is what I showed in Scrums, though. So this was like the first iteration of it. But it really kind of started from like, I want this thing. I want them there to be the ship to kind of pass the camera.
Yeah. What's Daedalus?
Oh, this was like a planet. I was
Okay.
like, maybe this would be the location of like, I thought about doing the Blade Runner text,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
something, and
Yeah.
then the whole like thing in the bottom could appear like this is where you are Tuesdays before, or some of the. This was like if I could do a longer piece of storytelling, that maybe this would be where the location was, or,
Right.
um, and so this was what all this was.
Okay.
Daedalus is, I believe it's a Roman thing, but I actually remember it the most from. Uh, I think there's two things I remember it from. One was from Diablo 2. There was a weapon that one of the characters had in that, and then it's also from uh, Dota,
Uh-huh.
the game.
Yeah.
Daedalus is one of the weapons that you could get, so I liked the term and name for that.
Got it. Got it. Got it. What about Cobalt?
So initially, so the story behind all of this small short is that there's sort of these guardians that would protect the universe known as the Wardens, and
Hmm.
each one of them would be themed around basically a color or a spectrum of a prism. So there would be several different colors. I have a younger child, and so I've been reading a lot of books with colors in them, a lot of rainbow books. And so I
Hmm.
thought it might be interesting to just do one based off of like Roy G. Biv, but just maybe change the colors around so that they weren't red, orange, green, blue. This would
Yeah.
be like cobalt. You could do. I had a whole list of other ones that it could be. Could be amaranth for purple. It could be other colors or things that they would use instead of just saying red, orange, green, blue. And so this would have been like the introduction of one of those characters, like how you would find this is the Cobalt Warden, this is um, the Amaranth Warden, this is all of these other things. If
Right.
somebody says they just came from a Dota stream and the first thing you heard was Daedalus, yes, it was that was where I potentially had this planet set. Good call. I knew it was from Dota. It's like an
But
attack weapon.
is your short based on the world of Dota, or it's just you just like the
I just
word?
like the name.
Okay, so is this like
Yeah.
this is your own
Yeah.
invented narrative?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
So this would be like in this world, the Wardens are a group of protectors. Eventually, over time, whether they are killed or die or retire, they retire and put them in like a resting place,
Mhm.
tomb, or something like that, and you have to kind of go claim the next person to get the mantle of that would have to go claim them. And so this is probably the story of a character going to either attempt to claim it. Obviously, probably other people have done this before, so
Mhm.
that's where like this was going to be an important part of the storytelling, which I kind of omitted from that because I omitted like the opening text crawl with that would like explain
Yeah,
all that stuff. So I removed all this stuff to be like, lots of people have tried this before, and so I removed all that. But Yeah. And this was, as we were going through this and kind of like the questions you're asking, I'm like, I don't have the time to explain in this 90 seconds of film as much as I really want to. So a lot of it ended up getting cut.
Yeah, I mean, I had so much going on in my head of what my thing meant, but none of it is
Hmm.
really clear to a viewer. But it doesn't matter because it helps us move forward, I guess, on our own.
It helps you make decisions, like whenever you're like coming up with your next what a shot or the pacing or the vibe or the mood or it's
Hmm.
like, oh, I'll add some of this in just to have it there, or I ended up cutting all of this sequence basically entirely.
Mm.
What was
That
actually
was
going to be in there.
I was just watching. I rewatched the extended editions of all the Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
and they're long, and but they have all the crazy bonus features. And there was one on Tolkien, which I thought was interesting. Is like how he was when he was very young would invent languages,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of one of his first creative pursuits was inventing languages. And I guess a lot of the backstory that ended up becoming things like the Silmarillion and the backstory to Lord of the Rings were actually backstory created to create his languages,
Interesting. That's cool. I
and
love
that
that.
that the backstory would influence what kind of language would be used by the people in that story. And that's so that ending up becoming novels later was not the original reason why he had that backstory.
That's pretty
I thought
cool.
that was fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, I I just love that it's watching the evolution of somebody's story where it's like, oh, it didn't really start there. It started
Yeah,
way over here, but it kind of drifted over here over time.
yeah. Oh, Miguel's in here. What's up, Miguel?
Hello, Miguel. But yeah, that's kind of how I started this thing. And then I'll open up the file, but I figure at some point we'll play it. We could play it now or in a little bit. What do you think?
I mean, that's up to you. I mean, I think we're if you have it uploaded and we can
Yeah, let's
watch
just
it.
play it. We'll go ahead and play it, and then Chad, if anybody has questions about it, feel free to ask. I'll probably open up the Unreal file while Alex works on his stuff and kind
Mhm.
of poke around at things. So let's just go ahead and play this thing. Where is it? All right, here we go. Oh, hello. I've closed my shorts. There we go.
Nice.
So yeah, that's my Unreal Fellowship project. Thank you.
Hmm.
I had my friend. Somebody said the synth. My friend James ended up writing the music for the piece, which was a fun experience. I've never been able to do a short before, but that was cool.
Yeah. Did he have heads up like before the fellowship started that you had asked him and told him it was going to happen, or was it like a last minute thing with him?
It was pretty early. It was like in the first week, or like in the opening. It was like, "Hey, would you be down to like write the music for this?" And then he was cool with that idea. He was like, "Yeah, like I'm down to help, write some music, or give you samples, or he was kind of open to whatever."
Hmm.
He likes the type of music that I was kind of referencing, so we ended up making a Spotify playlist basically
Okay.
of like stuff that I was referencing. So I was kind of referencing stuff from Tron, I was referencing stuff from Blade Runner, referencing stuff from like Nolan movies like Inception
Hmm.
or Interstellar, and that was kind of where I was starting with like the vibe.
Hmm.
Somebody in the chat is asking how long it took to make this. It took about 6 weeks. I just wrapped up the Unreal Fellowship last week, and so that's 5 weeks of class, 6 weeks total
Hmm.
to do, where you also learn Unreal. But yeah, so he ended up giving me some samples. I just kind of wrote some stuff that was kind of like a sample selection, and then I placed those clips around on my current timeline in Premiere, and
Uh-huh.
then basically like sent him back a version that had that stuff all kind of assembled, and then he kind of went from there um, to, you know, make the final version. But we
Okay.
went back and forth a lot, so we probably spent about 4 or so weeks on it, just back
Right.
and forth of like, this is what I
That's cool
want,
though.
kind of.
That's
But
got a very
yeah,
cool vibe.
yeah, he did a great job with kind of dialing in the tone, and then one of the things that I had budgeted time for, but I wasn't sure about once I got further in, was like the whole sound design element, because I didn't end up doing any sound design.
Right.
Um, and so I kind of watched a couple things, like back and forth of like um, different movies, trailers, and stuff. Like, are they using sound design? It's something I'd like never really
Yeah.
gotten into. I figured I'll just have this up in case,
For
just
yours,
roll
it's
through.
not, I mean, being, like the music is, got such a rhythm and vibe to it that it doesn't really feel like it's missing anything. Like mine, the music was
Mm-hmm.
rather quiet in places, so
Mm-hmm.
it had space for me to add simple things like wind and rain.
Yeah.
But with yours, I think you'd end up having to kind of like bring down the volume of the music so that you could
Yeah.
hear effects, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Well, what he did, which was pretty cool, was like on this areas like here, there's basically like, I guess some filters that he could play with, but like he could like dial up like the buzz. So if when it comes in, it goes like whoosh in the music.
oh
He
cool.
could just like turn that up. So like once the final track was done, like
Yeah.
certain elements he could just emphasize.
So he's
Um,
filtering the music.
yeah, based
Yeah.
on what was happening in the scene. Uh, so yeah, it kind of helped it quite a bit. I ended up trying a couple times, putting some scenes in or some sounds in from Star Wars or Star Trek, and just like
Hmm.
trying like a landing sound or like a flyby sound and just the
Yeah.
opening,
Yeah.
and it really took me out of it right away. I was like, it's like stealing the thing. So I ended up just going with straight music, which I actually like quite a bit.
Yeah. No, it doesn't feel like it's missing anything as far as that goes. Has James ever done Foley in sound design? I assume he probably has.
He's done Foley and sound design, but he's more of a composer,
Yeah.
producer. So, but yeah, it was great. It was a really, really fun working with him. I've never, like I said, really done a short before and had to work with music. So the back and forth working with like a producer
Yeah.
was a total unknown, but it was really cool.
Awesome.
See a couple people in the chat. Hello, Alex F1, JD Digital, or Digi. It kind of gives the sci-fi dream feel. That was kind of what we ended up going with there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Very cool.
uh,
And then and so where did all the like the terrain,
that
ground, rocky
assets.
elements come from? Yeah.
Let's see. Um, some of this I just quickly put in. So the ships, all of the ships, there's like a ship kind of back in here, And then this ship is from Kit Bash. They have a spaceship kit.
Cool.
So they have some pre-made ships that you can get, and then they have like just a Kit Bash kit that you can get.
Yeah.
So I just actually grabbed one of their pre-made ones and threw that in here and just adjusted. It comes in as a blueprint, and then you can take the blueprint within that. There's probably 4 or 5 pieces in the blueprint, and you can scale them, move them around. And so I just slightly
It
reshaped.
comes from Kitbash as the blueprint, like they're
Mhm.
Unreal ready assets.
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
So I grabbed a bunch of those. That's what this one in the back here is. I had some ideas for other ones. You can I don't think you can really see it in this shot here, but there's kind of another one that's like here.
Oh, okay.
So just some stuff that's kind of in the back. Those are full ships from Kit Bash.
Okay.
This is from the marketplace. This is from the kit. This is, what is this? Megascans.
Okay.
Like this is a Megascans thing. Megascans things. This is just a big tube with a blend material on it that's just going from 2 Megascan materials.
Okay.
So one is this like windswept snow, and one is more of like an icy snow, and they kind of just blend together.
It's funny
So
how like all the Megascans materials max are like 2 by 2 meters
Mhm.
technically, but you can scale them up and it looks totally fine.
Yeah, I scaled this up significantly. I also cranked the displacement on it a lot. You can kind of see it, but I just cranked it a lot.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, just like
Did you block things out in Maya at all, or did you just do all the blocking in Unreal?
I did the overall in Maya, so I'll open that up here in a minute. But like this, okay, is just basically a plane.
Yeah.
That I sculpted in ZBrush. And then I threw some Megascans in here, but it's so dark you don't really see it. There's some stuff back here. This is all just a big plane that I displaced. So there's 2 planes in the background for this part. These are just some...
You displaced it in Unreal.
Yeah.
Cool.
What else is in here?
So now, are we in outer space, or are we on a planet?
You're in like the middle of like a moon, I think is what I had decided.
Okay.
You're in like a moon or some thing. You're definitely like not on the surface. I figured it's clearly inhabitable, I guess. I didn't show the character's face intentionally because I didn't want to have to answer whether they were like wearing a helmet or if they could breathe this. So it's kind of unknown, but I figured it's like some middle of an asteroid.
Okay. That must have made it tricky to figure out how to light it.
It was actually, I thought it would be very simple because what I really wanted was to have this other shot where like the top and the bottom of this sandwich had fog so that you could kind of see into them, but you couldn't really see exactly what it was, and maybe it would create some interesting things.
Yeah.
And that made it, first off, I learned the exponential height fog cannot be rotated.
Right.
And it only goes from the bottom up. It's not like a thin layer. It's just like an infinite depth. So that immediately dashed my plans of trying to do like take one, put it on top, and then put 2 there. So I couldn't do that.
Okay.
And so I kind of had to basically just experiment. The lighting ended up being, I did use the ultra dynamic sky, which is I think the same thing that you had used. And I just put it at like time of day 0, like 2400. So like it's midnight or 1 a.m. or whatever. And then I turned off almost everything, and there's an option in that to have auroras.
Oh, right.
So that's what all this kind of pink and purple and green stuff is that I had been playing with. It created all this lighting for me naturally, and that was kind of like the general tone that it was creating. And I could take the moon in that, and I could spin it or place the moon wherever I wanted.
Right.
So I ended up putting the moon back there and just using that as like the general ambient light that it was making. But it made it really difficult to light once it was in this location to make it seem bright enough or to make it not just feel totally ambient. So I ended up throwing a directional light in there to give it more of a motivation from where the light could be coming from.
Okay.
It's also to get this stuff. Like I wasn't getting any of this naturally.
So is the
So
snow from the ultra dynamic weather?
it is, and I ended up actually duplicating the ultra dynamic weather. So I have one that's set on the blizzard preset and one that's set on the snow preset.
Oh, cool.
And then I slightly adjusted them so that they weren't going the same direction. They were kind of crossing a little bit.
Hmm.
And so one is like a much faster, aggressive version, and then there's kind of like a subtle version as well in there. So,
Okay.
so there's you'll kind of see some that like go down and zigzag, and some that like really whip across the screen. So that's where there was two versions of snow particles.
Okay. So you can just drag it into the scene twice?
I just duplicated it. I didn't know if it would work. I was like, I guess I'll just. No, I was like, I want more snow,
Yeah.
but you can go in and like change the direction of where it came. So I just adjusted that,
Right.
and fortunately, I guess they work as
Oh,
companions to each other.
that's cool.
It did make the wind really, really powerful, which is something I wasn't able to really control as much.
Okay.
So there was many shots when the character, this one wasn't so bad, but when the character started walking, where it needed a lot of pre-roll frames to just like stop the cape from like zooming off the screen or like flying over the head or something like that.
Right.
But it was still cool to use. Let's see, you were asking about assets. So like these are just some rocks that I made and textured in Mixer. This is something that I made, blocked out in Maya and sculpted in ZBrush.
Cool.
This is that same tube
Okay.
with just displacement. This is a Megascans thing.
Okay.
This is a ship.
Oh, okay.
So
But yeah, the displacement to be so close to camera and still hold up, you must have had the tessellation pretty high.
actually, I just blurred it. It's the Tesla. Like if this was not depth of fielded out, it
Hmm.
looks kind of spiky.
Oh, okay.
So I just blurred it out because it was uh, getting a little too intense. And this is actually a separate tube. So there's two tubes, and I
Hmm.
basically just like Venn diagrammed them so that this
Okay.
one in the front was slightly more in the bottom of frame.
Okay.
This is just some rocks that I made. So I just ended up making some rocks and displacing them in Unreal. This is a sort of like a shelf that I made. So this is a Megascans asset. This is the tube.
Uh-huh.
And this, with this kind of swirly black pattern on it, is stuff that I made and textured in Mixer. And
Cool.
that's a ship.
So you ended up using Mixer a bit?
I like Mixer a lot. I think it's great.
Cool.
I made all
Yeah,
this
intuitive.
stuff.
Cool. Yeah, that all looks really cool. Background.
Yeah, this was actually a huge happy accident. I went onto the ArtStation marketplace and I ended up downloading some biomechanical textures
Hmm.
from somebody on ArtStation.
Okay.
Uh, and they had some cool ones that I ended up just creating all these presets within Mixer. And so I dragged it on. First, I set it to tiling or whatever.
Hmm.
I'll show you that in a minute, I guess. And the sort of like shale slate pattern that it was creating, which is kind of interesting.
Uh-huh.
And then I threw, in Mixer, you just put on the next level. So I put like a windswept snow, and then it
Uh-huh.
just went from only on top and just
Mhm.
adjust the threshold down a little bit so that it was just starting to peek through. And
Yeah.
it created like a nice kind of like swept over but organic shaly
Uh-huh.
vibe.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, and then in the end, I did do a couple, like there's like a Megascans thing in here and in here to just create some different shapes that I just pushed in and then ended up putting the pixel depth offset in there.
Okay.
So, yeah, same within here. The character was getting lost in the dark area here as they
Hmm.
were walking up, and so I just put a little bit of snow here so that you could see them a little bit better. And then this door and all this stuff I sculpted and used a lot of mixer and texture materials for all this stuff. Ended up downloading some brushes from, I think it's Pablo Gomez,
Uh-huh.
who does some cool geegery
Yeah, I
biomechanical
saw
stuff.
that
So
on
that's what this is.
Instagram a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So that's like all this stuff in here is using that. Some of those materials. And this is some of that the ArtStation Marketplace. The same pack that I had gotten had
Okay.
several different types.
So like biomechanical meshes or textures?
Textures. Let me see if I can find them. I'm sure it's in my library there, right? Where would they be? Biomecha Volume 4. How do I get to the actual page? I see it in my library, but I don't see it in the like an option to get there.
But it was an ArtStation find.
It was, yeah. They're like
Were you
$5
just
or something like
searching
that.
for the word biomechanical?
Actually, one of the people in the fellowship, I had started sculpting with these brushes, and I'd sent them. I would just random, as everybody does in the fellowship, you kind of just send people, what you're working on,
Yeah.
and so I sent these. Let's see, I think I found it. Yeah. So he has all of these, which are kind of like.
They were cool.
Yeah, and they're not super expensive, and it comes with color, ambient, normal, rough, and displacement.
Okay.
And so there's like more organic-y ones, more this type of stuff.
Does he say how he made them?
It doesn't say.
Probably substance.
Probably substance or something like that. But
Yeah, they're neat looking.
they were really cool. So I just kind of that's after I had done some of the more Giger sculpting stuff. Somebody posted like, "Oh, I found these and these are super cool." So I downloaded them and got them all into Mixer so that I could start overlaying them. And Dennis Bosk is who it's from.
Cool.
And those were a huge help to just kind of push things along much, much faster.
Yeah.
For sure. And then this is all just stuff that I kind of populated at the end to fill out the space. So Megascans, probably some Megascans and Quixel.
Yeah.
Some retextured stuff, but mostly just putting stuff in the dark to create shapes.
Yeah.
But yeah. It was really fun.
So what's in his hand that opens the door?
It was an orb. So I
Okay.
have an orb, and that was one of the things, like after going through the fellowship, the one thing that I really wish I would either could have focused on or spent more time on was visual effects part of it.
Right.
Because I wanted to have the door, like when they go and they open the door here, like whether it was like like it would open, like a light would come out through the center and go top to bottom, or some sort of like thing where it would do multiple moves. And I could have done that through like a more complex animation.
Right.
But like I had an orb, I just blew it out so you couldn't see it. But you can kind of see like right here, there's like a tiny little orb.
Okay.
But it was because I was at near the end of my project, and I was like, they have to open this thing. Either I'm going to frame it so you can't see them do it, which kind of feels okay but weird. But they basically come out and they like do this to the door, and when they were doing that with an object that you could see, it just looked odd. It was just like touching a bowl to a door.
Right.
Well, that's kind of anticlimactic and actually more distracting. So, yeah, but they're holding a little orb, which is also the same thing that they're holding to light up the area.
Yeah.
So, in the longer cut version, it was like they had come out with like a torch, basically the equivalent of a torch, and where that's what this green light would be, and then they drop it, and so there was always going to be this light kind of in this space, and then they would walk past that and pull something out of their cloak and put it into the thing. There's a whole part of the animation where they walk up, grab something, put it in there, and then put it back. But it ended up just being kind of long.
Yeah. So
So,
did you, once you had your storyboards, did you just
mhm.
block everything out like shot to shot, like super roughly, and then just start, swapping things with final geometry, or did you like how did you approach going from your storyboards to blocking it out
um,
in 3D?
I started out. Let me see if I can find an early version, as I have many of them here. So the
I
version
started in
that'll.
Unreal and then kind of decided,
Oh, you
I don't
did?
know Unreal enough to do my block out, and that's why I jumped to Maya.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's probably a way to do it, and just fine in Unreal. It's just I needed all the poly modeling tools just to start
Right.
modeling out basic shapes.
I ended up doing most of my block out in Unreal
Okay.
because I knew that's where it was going to go, and I didn't want to waste like tons of time,
Yeah.
um, you know, translating what I had, or setting up the camera live link or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the lighting and everything, I basically spent a lot of time. Actually, that's the one of the earlier ones. Let's see what I can find here. I found like the full first animatic, but I want to find something before that. That's when I was doing some tests. Here, we'll just look at this QuickTime file. This is the first very long version that I did. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a little slow. But you can see the opening. The gamma is off on this, obviously. But similar thing. I'd move the moon. I had an idea that the whole interior of this, to make it feel more dangerous, was going to have all these asteroids. So it was much more cluttered in here. There was also a whole sequence once they kind of come in here where they're going to be flying through this asteroid field. Flying through an asteroid. The ship is all jacked up as far as lighting and everything is concerned. You kind of get a better sense of where you're landing.
Right.
Do a whole landing sequence. Potentially do some very silhouetted shots of the place opening. Cut all this stuff. And then this is basically with the block out of where I was going to, of just trying to frame the camera in a way that I thought could be interesting, frame the location in a way that could be interesting. And then for all of the rest of it, you'll see here, this is just a T-pose character. I don't think it'll play very well on stream. But just like move the character into frame so they could kind of see what it was going to look like.
Yeah.
And then from there, I actually just ended up animating more or less linearly. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to animate the whole process of them walking, but I know I want a shot of them walking. So I want a shot of them coming into frame, like here.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that shot set up. Like I know I want that. Okay, we can progress a little further. I know I want a shot of them. It's more of an establishing shot, so I added that shot in. Another high, that was from like my reference of like some higher aerial establishing shot.
Mm-hmm.
Set up that, and then basically from here I started animating linearly as far as what the character would be doing. So all right, you're going to open the door, then you're going to walk inside, then you're going to do this thing, and you're going to do this thing. So now you'll see all the stuff that all the real stuff that I cut, which is they walk in, they approach. This is that whole thing where they grab something out of their belt. I don't know how choppy it is for you. I'm scrubbing very slowly. They touch something to the door. Boom, it opens up. And then they walk inside. Here you can see that robot from my initial stuff. And so this was them entering. They would see the space. And then there would basically be the sequence where they would come over and interact with it. So I cut all this out, but I animated it as if it was what would be happening next.
Right. Was
So
the
it wasn't
robot
really-
going to be something from Marketplace or something you were going to make?
I was going to make it. I had already made all this, and I figured I would just focus on the air. This is all supposed to be in black, as you've kind of already seen.
Yeah.
But, so I just started animating this whole sequence of where they would walk, where they would get to the edge. They would see something in here. They would jump down onto this little where they would notice there's a platform, and there was supposed to be a kind of a light up here. So they would jump down on this thing. This is them jumping down. I also realized doing this that the cloth was going to be a huge pain.
Right.
So they climb down all this thing, they jump, they land, they end up walking over here. They explore the area, they check out the thing. They run away, they hear a noise. They run away. They jump and they climb up the wall. They get to the top right as they hear that the noise was that the doors were closing. The doors begin closing. This is where the cloth was doing lots of fun things every frame. There we go. She throws it off her head, and there'd be the idea was that there would be a bunch of creatures kind of in this space, like starting to swarm her, and that was the thread all along. Was that wasn't necessarily getting there. That was obviously a challenge, but even if you got inside and got to the thing, kind of Indiana Jones style, that the temple starts to collapse around you, or there's a creatures in there that attack you, and so there would be sort of like a shootout sequence where they would shoot as all these characters were attacking them, and then it would probably cut to black as like the creatures swarmed them. So that's like 2.5 minutes that I ended up cutting out, which is basically all of the action sequence at the end, and then all of this fly through asteroid sequence through there.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I just kind of didn't feel like it wasn't going to get to the level that I wanted it to, because I knew there was too much to fix, and I think at this point I had like 2.5 weeks left.
Yeah, there's so many little things that come in towards the end too, because then you start realizing like, what font am I going to use on the title, and what it's you just start slowing down as you get to the last few days. Yeah, and you just I mean, so do you
like just timing it all to the music was a whole thing. Like, all right, I'm going to time everything to the music, or I ended up using movie render queue, and turning the anti-aliasing up a bit. So the renders were quality, but then that meant that it wasn't just render 60 frames in a couple seconds. It was several minutes of rendering time.
Did you have the whole thing in like a master sequencer file so that you could see the whole short in Unreal?
Nope. I wish I did that. But I was so far in at that point that I was like, to fix this. Like, to put it all in a master and to correct everything the way that I wanted, I was like, this is going to be a time sink to do that. So,
I mean, I've used Premiere for so long, so I really just wanted to do my editing Premiere, and it just seemed like doing the shots one by one to the storyboards, and then padding, with handles at the beginning, at the end, so each shot's a little longer than needed, so I could then adjust the edit later.
Yeah,
felt like I was just more comfortable with that. So like, I wonder with, something like that Weta short with like the eagle, like, even though it does play in Unreal,
it's cool.
That off Marketplace, it's amazing. You kind of wonder, like, did they do it just one shot at a time and then at the end assemble the master sequence, or was that something all along that, it's something to get used to, because it's such a different way to work.
Yeah. I would like to. I think it would be a good way.
At the same time as creating the short.
Yeah, I'll open up my file, but my file is a disaster. Like, it is not an example of what I would say is like a good way to build an Unreal scene like this. For sure.
That's why they said Rebirth isn't on Marketplace.
And at first I was like, I want to see it anyways. And then now, after completing it, I'm like, I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want to give this file to anybody else either. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, you're learning, so things like I didn't like my outliner in Unreal is I didn't group anything, I didn't name anything, I didn't so it's just this long list of stuff, which I generally would never work that way in Maya, because I like to be anal and take my time and use layers and groups and naming, and I didn't do that at all on my project. Just too rushed.
I did a little bit early, and then at a certain point I just kind of stopped.
Yeah, it makes it hard to go back though.
Yeah, it does.
If I were to open one of those files now, then it'd be like,
yeah, absolutely. You're like, oh, I started messing things up now. Or you rename something and it's like you lose all your references and you have to find it again. All right, well, I'll show you a couple of my ways I made this. So I started out in this main sequence, which is now kind of deprecated and broken. Um, so I don't really use that anymore. And I basically broke it into my opening shot. I started naming things final, which is a huge mistake because that means it'll never be the final thing. But I did, and so that's where that is. So this will be the opening shot in here. It's getting a little slow on me here, and then this is all my other shots are in here.
Okay.
So these two levels. This is basically, I'll crank this up so we can move around. This is just that opening sequence where they fly through this area. Because the whole thing was intended to have this kind of camera move where the whole camera would spin, I built it all vertically. I now know that because I never had that spin, I would have definitely built it horizontally because it's way harder to work in this like tiny little vertical sliver than it is in a horizontal area.
I can imagine.
So that actually ended up causing me a ton of issues, like a lot of issues. But this is all this. This is what the exterior looks like. So this is the ultra dynamic sky, just with the auroras on and kind of cranked up, and then you can tint the stars. So I tinted them green.
Okay.
So this is the actual sun itself, I think.
Trippy.
Kind of cool though. I just played around with the settings and kind of tried to get it to where it was something not exactly what you would see before. And then this, you basically can fly through here. There's a bunch of cards in here and some Megascans assets to the center.
Okay.
And I'm moving way too fast. This is another thing I started dealing with was once you get the two sizes of scale, like a really big scale and then like a pretty normal scale.
Yeah.
Like to get to like, oh, I got to come out here to adjust something. I'd have to like crank up everything, fly back there. That was a huge annoyance. But
you make bookmarks.
I never tried bookmarks.
Yeah, they're under the little arrow next to perspective, I think. They taught us a hotkey to make them. I think it was like Control 1, Control 2, Control 3 to set bookmarks so that 1 through 0 can be camera bookmarks. I only started using them towards the end when somebody saw me doing what you're doing, and they were like, "Why aren't you using bookmarks?"
Why don't you do that?
I didn't know that there were bookmarks.
I didn't know exactly. So this really
did
only...
Did you do the project at real world scale though? Meaning like centimeter?
Yeah. So this is the only shot that's in here now, which is just this one. So it's just this. Just a slow push, and then there's a ship that flies by, which I was never able to time exactly the way that I wanted it to. Because the scale was so large, and the speed of what the ship would need to fly by, like it was basically animating two things moving to get the timing to work out in a way that felt okay was actually kind of difficult. So once I got it in a way that I was like, this is kind of working, I just didn't really mess with it too much. But I did end up buying some effects on the marketplace.
I was about to ask about the exhaust.
Yeah, so there's some cool effects that I got here that you can get. Somebody had exhausts. They were just sci-fi exhausts. So
From
it was a whole bunch.
Just exhausts, and that's just what's in the file?
Yeah. We'll jump in there because I'm basically done with this one. This is all that level is.
Yeah.
So you could... Ooh, now we're going to 8. Let's go at 3. But these are all just different exhausts.
Oh, nice.
So I just kind of went through here and picked the exhaust that I wanted, combined it, played around with a couple different ones for some reason there's some floors here, but I just kind of picked the one I wanted and just parented it.
That's cool. Yeah, marketplace is the coolest thing.
Oh, it's awesome.
It's like now, like once you get used to or experience marketplace, it just sort of becomes baffling how like, Maya's never really had a good equivalent. Like people obviously would sell things on Turbo Squid or, all the newer places that things exist now, but like being able to get like good fire presets for Maya was, or anything was really just the
Yeah.
ones it came with, which never looked good, you
Mm-mm.
know. So Marketplace is the best because obviously any one of these now you could use as a start point.
Yeah, and they're all cool. So you can kind of come into any of these, and I think it was like exhausts, particles. I think I duplicated one of these. Yeah, this exhaust rectangle. So you can
Hmm.
kind of come in here, uh, and this just kind of gives you all the options for it. So this
Hmm.
is, the thing. There we go, and you can just turn them off. So I don't want the core. I
Yeah.
don't want the cone. I don't want the distortion or whatever it was, and just keep the elements that you want. Change the colors of the things that you want,
Yeah.
or sizes and shapes. So like the cone, I think, which is this core. No, the cone. Cone. Come in here and say whatever size.
Hmm.
So you can say zero point 0.5. And you just change the way that that one looks or
Hmm.
adjust it all. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was a fun thing that I ended up finding for that. What else did I end up using? I did the same actually for camera shake. I didn't use a lot of serious camera shake, but there was one called Cinemotion in the marketplace where they just have a bunch of pre-made camera shakes, and
Nice.
some of them include whip pans, they include tilts, they include looks, shakes, look arounds, and all that stuff,
Hmm.
which is kind of cool. So I ended up using those.
Yeah, I think I never downloaded that one, but I think that one was recommended to us. So
Yeah,
there
it's
is
a
a
good one.
shake. There's a shake node in Unreal, so that's what I ended up using on the two where I
Hmm.
wanted to look like the camera was on the horse,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so the built-in shake node is actually shockingly simple. It's just like frequency and phase and
Yeah,
speed.
I like it. I tried some burnout stuff. You can see some other things. I tried Brushify. This is where I downloaded all my asteroids from that I ended up using. But
Yeah,
you could populate a place with asteroids super easily. Basically, you drag a blueprint in, tell it how many you want and what scale and what like the size
yeah.
variance is, and you get an asteroid field, which
How
is
did you
pretty
feel
awesome.
about, in the end though? How did you feel about using pre-made assets by other people to make something as opposed to making everything yourself? Because it weirded me out in the beginning.
It was the same for me at the beginning. I wished that I could have made everything, but I know that there was no way in the time allotted that I could.
Right.
Like I know I could make asteroids. Maybe I would replace the meshes. I know that I could figure out how to make a randomly generated field,
Yeah.
to scatter a field. But then
It's time. It's like, of
it's
course,
so much time.
Oh, hey, Emmanuel is in here.
Emmanuel, hello.
Hello,
Your
another
short is
fellow.
beautiful.
Yeah, very, very cool. I liked his a lot. Hats
Absolutely.
off, sir.
Yes.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's like, of course, you could model an asteroid or make one of these. It's just with the time, it's just, I
Hmm.
just started figuring like, fuck it. I'm just going to use Marketplace heavily. And if I have time, I'll swap
Yeah.
it with my own stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's kind of
then
what I was hoping.
for most of those things, I didn't have time to do that.
Yeah. That's why I'll show you the ships. Kit Bash 3D has some cool ships. So they have a whole, I think it's a maps. Do they have maps? Actors, geometries? No.
Emmanuel, we're going to have to get you to join us one week on our
Yeah,
chat. Would love to hear more about your short if you're up for it one day.
absolutely. These are the pre-made ones. They had like A through J that you could get. And at first I was like, this was the rough shape that I had wanted, which was, viewport, was kind of this shape. This
Cool.
sort of like Galaga shape, I guess. Like
Nice.
I was like, oh, I kind of want that shape, like with these big things coming off the side. And I had made one in ZBrush. I was like, I'll replace it later, but I just never found the time to like replace the ship. Or it kind of came down to the point of like, there's things that I want to fix in the short overall, like as a whole,
Hmm.
and most of the things that I had purchased or were using weren't the things that I wanted to fix. It was like that's not an eyesore enough, or that's not a big enough deal for me to fix. I need to fix some other issue. If I have a week of time, I could spend that all modeling a new ship, or I could fix all these other problems, and the whole short will look better overall.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like since rendering's so not an issue with Unreal, like replacing
Hmm.
an asset later and re-rendering that shot would be so quick.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's like you could in a month model a ship yourself and just go to
Hmm.
those four shots that have the ship and
Right.
swap.
And just replace it, and it's super easy to replace too, because
Mhm.
you can just replace actor. So you can like come in and like basically pick one, select it, and be like replace, and it'll swap it all for you. And ideally, it'll be done. Somebody was saying, "What blueprint are we looking for the afterburners? They look great." I think this was from I want to say it was from the Unreal Marketplace, but I did do sort of a selection of things from. I'm checking on my ArtStation as well. I think it was from Unreal. I don't remember the specific because it doesn't have the info in here, I don't think.
Toby Lewin's in here. Hey, Toby.
Sup, Toby? So yeah, I ended up doing that. What else did I use in here? Some fog cards from masks of fog cards. Never got those to look exactly the way I wanted. Paragon, I ended up using the Sparrow character from Paragon. But the cool thing about that is they have all of these skins.
Right.
All the
Yeah, I downloaded a couple of the Paragon characters just to check them out.
yeah,
I mean, I got lost. I spent, a solid 3 days when I was looking for assets for
yeah.
mine, just going through Marketplace. And oh my
Oh yeah,
God, you just can lose so much time because it's fun just to look at other
oh yeah.
people's assets and how they're modeled, how they're textured, how they're shaded, how they're rigged,
Hmm.
it's like for learning. It's really, really awesome.
Yeah. And this one ended up having the claw sim already on it, so I ended up using the Rogue
Hmm.
uh, skin,
Cool.
and so that had everything that I kind of needed on it. I did end up accidentally changing her face to another skin's face, but you never see it.
Okay.
Uh, I was thinking about just retexturing the materials because these are using RGB masks to bring in materials. So
Yeah.
I could either paint new masks or I could replace the material. If I wanted like a black Jedi cloak, I could
Hmm.
just replace the material or tint the albedo of it. But I ended up not doing any of that. Kind of the same reason for the ship. I was like, this is fine. Like I don't need to spend the time changing this.
It's funny that she's got blue stripes because my character, I had the version with the mask on, but if you take his
Yeah.
mask off, he's got blue stripes on
Oh,
his face.
really?
So that's the thing.
I accidentally swapped it, and I was like, it's fine. I'm probably never gonna see it. Like, and if you do it, it'll be more interesting than just like a normal one. All right, we'll go into this interiors and exteriors. This is where I spent most of my time. All right, make this a little bigger. And then most of this, I did end up using a pretty heavy amount of spawnables because I was using a lot of displacement.
Uh-huh.
Um, it was getting very slow.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah. And so these are some of the ships that I had just from Kit Bash. Like if I wanted to put something in the background,
Cool.
you can see what they have as far as some cool stuff there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then so I went into my sequences, and these were basically, or my cinematic sequences.
Hmm.
And these are all the ones that I had. So like the first one was like the walk from ship, and this is basically here. So I'll override this, and you'll kind of see that is where that comes from.
Yeah.
But now you'll kind of get a sense of what's actually happening, that this is basically a tube is all this is.
Okay.
And this is a section of a tube just with better UVs
Yeah.
in a smaller region
Yeah. Yeah.
in case I wanted to put any custom stuff in there.
And you said that
And
has a displacement on it.
yeah, it's pretty cranked up too.
So did you have
Like
to tessellate it externally? Because I had to do that with my one of mine. Is that the tessellation? There's a limit to how many times it'll tessellate something in Unreal. So I had to like take the mesh to Maya and subdivide
Mhm.
it a bunch of times and then bring it back to Unreal.
Yeah, it's pretty high res on mine.
Yeah.
It's 100,000 or more, I would
Yeah.
guess,
Exactly. Yeah.
to get like the base displacement going.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
crazy that it just like that you can take something
Works.
that's 100,000 and, subdivide it several times and have a real-time displacement, and
Yeah.
it's just fine. Like Maya's
Yep.
viewport wouldn't like that.
Absolutely not.
So
And
there's
so
all
I,
these things that like you don't do because you think you're not supposed to, because Maya
yeah,
wouldn't like it.
yeah.
So it takes a while to get over that kind of like, hinder like slowing yourself down, like, oh wait, I better not have too many polys in viewport because Maya
Hmm.
doesn't like that.
And then this is just a section of a tube that has the two materials on it that are being vertex blended together through this material.
Oh, cool.
So this is basically modes. If you go to modes, mesh paint, and paint, and you just kind of turn, I think it was this one. I haven't done this in a little bit, but we'll see. Turn this up. Just thinking about it. We'll turn the red. Oh, blue's on. So you'll see this can paint in
Mm-hmm.
that section. And then I think if you hit the switch button or something, yeah, X will switch these. So I can paint snow in an area, and then I could paint the rock area, icy rock in an area.
Awesome.
And you can kind of play with the adjustments as far as how they fade in,
Mm-hmm.
because I use the Megascans material, which you use as their height maps to like bring it in for that. So this was a really simple material that I basically, once I had this one, like I did this one, I'll undo some stuff here.
Did you set up the blend yourself, or did you do it via the Megascans plugin?
The plugin, I just grabbed the two and hit made material
Okay.
in this thing. So it's like,
Yeah, the create material blend. Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
discover that till later. I'm like, what's that button?
yeah, same. Till I had like a week and a half left. I was like, oh, I could have done this the whole time.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I made this one section. So like when the ship basically flies in, you'll see my really, again, I wish I had more experience in effects or particles, but like I'll get out of this mesh paint mode. My helicopter landing, I think it's called a brownout, but I made this effect from Niagara
Okay.
so that you could kind of get closer to it and it would be all right
Mm-hmm.
for this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so in case you were closer, there would be like an internal one that would be pushing everything outwards, and then there's a couple ones on the outside
Mm-hmm.
that create the variance of the effect. But this whole sequence from here, I just animated it turning off at a certain point. It looks like that's also moving on accident. But that just turns off. And
Mm-hmm.
then from this angle, we're here, so you can see even.
Did you do the animation of the ship landing in Unreal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every animation I did inside of Unreal.
Cool.
So this all lands. Get out of this camera. And so I had played with a bunch of shots. I wanted to do a close-up of the ship, but I didn't want to have to do the close-up of the ship just for time-wise.
Yeah.
So I just made a bunch of cubes in here that just rotate, and like the character just pops out.
Yeah.
So this character is creating a shadow for when the character all of a sudden appears. But the ship, this is literally just a cube that rotates, and then the character starts walking. And so you'll see some difference in the lighting based on where they were in the short.
Right.
So she gets out and starts walking. You can see the ground even changes because from let's see, what was it? This one's called probably Walk. I love this search bar. This thing is amazing. How in the sequencer you can just search for stuff. Because you can see what it was. Oh, really? Anything in sequencer you can just search right here.
Okay.
And it'll pull up. So if you know like the title of your thing is called, for example, my shot is called Walk.
Yeah.
I just search Walk and I can click this button to just look at that camera.
Okay.
And so you'll see how like this is what it looked like from the previous angle.
Yeah.
But there was some stuff here that was kind of in the way. It wasn't working. So in this angle, I just composed it as of here.
Okay.
To spawn or to change the location or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
So it had different lighting. And yeah, all the animation, the character animation is mocap. But,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, and that was that one.
Did you have a lot of clips where you wish they were like a few frames longer?
Oh, so many. Or they were doing something for just slightly longer.
I know.
Or
Finding the right mocap clip was always this like,
yeah.
and then it's like, okay, this one's too short, but maybe if I blend it with this one and slow it down, and it's
Yeah.
the whole, you know, it was an experience. It's fun though, orchestrating mocap.
Oh, of course.
You said you got
And then
yours from Mixamo or
I
ActorCore?
did Mixamo, ActorCore, and then the Fellowship has that short mocap session.
Yeah,
And so part of what I did before doing any of the animation for the character or figuring out what those shots would be was I
Mhm.
just looked through their library of what all the mocap had been and just started looking through all the clips basically and being like, I could use this, I could use this clip, I could use this clip, I could use this clip, and then found ones that I thought would work. So there was already a clip that somebody had wanted from a previous fellowship of somebody like walking through a storm.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, my
and
camera's frozen.
oh yeah, you are frozen.
It's weird.
But yeah, I found that. So you notice that as soon as I switch over to this next sequence, it's completely different. That ship's not there, and now there's several of these tubes, which are kind of like stacked on each other, because this shot here is so low that you don't really see it. So I just basically composed where the character would be in this location specifically for this shot. Oh, you're off the screen now. So
Just
I ended up doing that way. Oh, yeah. Weird. Might be easier to just rejoin. So I ended up doing all this, basically. And you can barely see the character in the back walking, which is something I kind of wanted. But if you go to the actual, if I got out of this, the character's not actually where they are walking in the next shot. They're kind of strategically placed in a location where you can see them. Alex F1 is asking, how do you consider learning Unreal versus learning other 3D softwares regarding the time needed to master it at a decent level? That's a good question. I think for me, learning the software itself isn't terribly difficult. I think that as far as like the navigation, the navigation and all that stuff seems to be really user friendly, actually. Like I think the way you move around, a lot of that stuff I think is pretty straightforward. Oh, you're back.
I'm
You're
back.
not frozen.
Amazing.
Yeah, somebody was asking, how do you consider learning Unreal versus other 3D software? I was saying that I think like the navigation and getting into it is actually really easy. I think it's just getting into the mindset of how it functions is a little harder.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you know another 3D program, then learning Unreal is, you know, you just have to see what you would use it for and what you wouldn't use it for. But I mean, the fact that you made this in a month
Sure.
shows that Unreal is fairly intuitive. I think that's what the fellowship kind of proves, is that for
Mm-hmm.
people who know another 3D program, it's accessible,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
But I think that, the fellowship, you're doing 40 hours or 80 hours a week. So if somebody's going to only do 5 hours every Saturday learning Unreal, then it's going to take a few months.
Yeah.
It's pretty intuitive. It's just different. Like materials
Mm-hmm.
are weird.
Yeah.
So it takes a second to, um, understand that. Sequencer is weird. So it takes a second to understand that. But so is ZBrush. Like, Jesus
Mm-hmm.
Christ. If there's a program that's weird, it's
Mm-hmm.
ZBrush. And we all just deal with it.
Yeah. You get through it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's wildly complex. I think it's just the mindset of it for me.
Yeah. I mean, Real we weren't exposed to that, I'm sure once you get into Blueprint, they can get pretty complex pretty fast. But that's more if
Yeah.
you're a game developer. I think that if you're an artist who wants to make shorts
Mm-hmm.
or your own environments for yourself that are fairly, simple. You just want to wander around your own little world. It's basically like using Unreal for scene assembly, I think is probably one of the more straightforward things to do with it
I agree.
compared to like
Yeah.
making a game.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Because that obviously gets, you know, like we have a ton of Unreal classes at Gnomon that go a lot more in depth in different areas than the Fellowship does, because it does get deep, especially if you get into effects where you're using Unreal with Houdini and, you know, using Alembic files and going back and forth. I'm sure that opens a rabbit hole. But importing geometry and positioning it and lighting,
Mm-hmm.
it's not too bad.
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's actually the real time element of it is just so fast. So
Yeah,
even
that
if there
helps a lot.
is parts of it that are hard, if there's something of it that's like difficult to wrap your head around, because you can see the outcome so quickly
Mhm.
and there's no like render time to see what it looks like,
Yeah,
that speeds up how fast you're able to like progress in that area.
yeah.
Like particles, for example, were always a very difficult thing for me.
Hmm.
But in this, not that I made the best particle ever, but it was enough that I could adjust it quickly and be like, that'll be fine. Like, I don't need to do that. I don't need
Yeah,
to wait for these renders or caches or anything like that.
yeah.
Um, just
But
really
the
fit
quality
quick.
of the final result, I think that, you know, with any of the projects, whether it's, you know, things from the Fellowship or things other people are making, it's all based on the quality of the assets you made somewhere else
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in the end.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing effects and you're using, you know, sprites, then where did those flip books come from? You probably didn't make them in Unreal. You probably made them in Maya, Houdini, Embergen, or whatever.
Right.
You know, so it's like, you know, will Unreal become an all-in-one, like all-in-one DCC app where you can model and texture and do materials and do fluids and volumetrics? One day, I guess. They're throwing so much money at it.
Mm. It's possible.
Yeah, so somebody asked earlier if we have Unity classes.
Mm.
Not so much. We did at the beginning, so of our games program and our games track, it was like Unreal and Unity. So like some lower level classes, we would start people with Unity and then transition them over to Unreal. But now it's mostly Unreal.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You'll see that even in this shot, I think it's right here. Oh, it's like a transition of I moved thing basically like this is an element right here. This is an element right here. So I just started placing some things
Did you
wherever
use
it.
the virtual textures to do the blending?
I did pixel depth offset,
Okay.
which basically just creates a dithering, which you
Hmm.
can control. But there was times when I didn't realize that it was too intense or not intense enough for some reason, depending on the shot, and so I ended up kind of having to re-render a bunch of things. So you can see my animations down here are kind of just cobbled together of one long one, a couple of them like blended together, and then just placing them depending on what needed to be done. Same thing with all this stuff. This looks like it's still streaming in textures, but there's some stuff back here. This was like other shots that I didn't end up using and are no longer in the camera cuts track.
Did you get that
You can,
pool size warning a lot? Texture streaming?
oh yeah, I just never adjusted it though.
No.
No,
Well,
it didn't give
sometimes
me.
if your textures don't load in, they'll just stop loading in, and then I had to
Oh really?
use the CVAR that increases the texture pool limit. It's
So you can.
like pool size dot stream dot, I don't remember off the top of
Mhm.
my head.
So you can kind of see down here is all that animation that I ended up doing before that just lived in the scene for a
Okay.
long. This is all the stuff that was there, of like the character animating or doing different things or walking. I don't know where they're going to be at when I do this, but there they are. Doing something way over here, looking at things. And this is where I just downloaded a bunch of clips as far as like none of the clips were long enough to really get to go together. So it was like, well, if they're going to jump, they have to
Hmm.
can only do the jump part of it, or I can only show the landing part of it, or I can only show the jumping part of it. So I just
Yeah.
tried to frame in that part, which I'll cut out,
Hmm.
the shots dependent on what the mocap could really do.
Yeah.
Whereas some of these were a little more longer from previous mocap sessions or things like that. That would be kind of fine to hold on. Yeah, it's definitely fun though. And for me, it was once I had gotten kind of the set laid out, knew what the character, where they'd be progressing, I just
Hmm.
kind of started to explore for cinematography or like what, I knew that I had wanted like a high shot like this, Um, I knew that I wanted a shot that was kind of farther away, so I would just kind of go explore around and look for camera angles that would be interesting. And I wasn't super precious with like how everything looked, so I just started composing it. I'm looking for the manipulator, which is hidden somewhere. I would just drag like this out of the way, or I'd drag this out of the way
Yeah.
to frame the shot to be more of what I wanted, or move these. These things got moved all over the place depending on what was needed.
Hmm.
You can see some of them apparently reset to the middle of the scene in this sequence. I don't know why.
Oh, is that the origin right there?
Yeah, so there's like a bunch of them just like stacked in here, I'm sure. Yeah, oddly enough. It's like falling through a level in a game.
Yeah. Did you ever have a problem breaking earlier shots because you like forgot to put something into sequencer that you were going to move?
I didn't have a problem breaking earlier shots, but I definitely messed up my camera moves a lot on
Yeah.
accident. Being in like the piloting the camera
Hmm.
thing and
Yeah.
just being like, oh, time to go check out this thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you come back and your whole camera move is completely gone. And you're like, oh no, I should have set keyframes on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you don't, then, or if you have like auto key on, which I ended up using a lot, uh, it'll just rewrite your whole camera move.
Yeah. I never liked auto key because I've screwed things up before. You got to be careful.
Yeah, you gotta be super careful with this thing on. I ended up using two viewports quite a bit.
Hmm.
Uh, and then so one would be like you could pilot just the camera from that. So if you go like viewports, viewport two, which is
Yeah.
on my other monitor and is massive right now. Um, come on, there we go. So I would come in here and say this one is called like aerial. So aerial establish. Click on this viewport. Click on this. Then I would know that I could only move around in this one. And this
Yeah.
one I would use as like my shot cam,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
It worked out well though. And I kind of liked that because this one I could go over on my other screen and do like full screen on, and just be looking at what the final result would look like.
Yeah. So did you end up rendering out as just like 8-bit like PNGs, or did you render out as like 16-bit
I,
EXRs?
I just did PNGs. I thought about doing EXRs and trying to push it further, but I ended up just doing a very very little bit of color correction at the end,
Yeah.
and that was basically it. So I didn't want to.
Yeah, I did too, because I was scared of what would happen if I rendered as
Hmm.
EXRs and brought it in post and started color correcting there, and then that would just add,
Yeah,
like, I didn't want to like end up falling in love with a look that another program was making, and then like it would just open up a rabbit hole of going back and forth between Unreal and Nuke
yeah,
before
exactly.
finaling, and I just didn't feel like I had the time with that. I wonder if Miguel and Tran would comp their
Totally.
project in Nuke. I don't remember.
Like I know that I could have probably pushed the short further if I would have done that with EXRs, like as far as the visual or the color correction or the quality of that.
Hmm.
But it, especially for the fellowship where you have such a finite amount of time,
Yeah.
it's like that's a significant amount of time to export everything, get it
Hmm.
in there, to do it properly, to really do it the way that you want to do,
Yeah.
um, and then get it in, and then export it all out, and then put it back. Like it's just a time, to
Yeah.
render everything and code everything.
And in the end, like, the post-process volume is
They're
cool and
great.
has,
Yeah.
enough controls to be able to get things to look decent.
Oh yeah. I think
So I think in the end, I was fine with the look I was able to get just in Unreal, and that in the end
yeah.
was so cool because I've gotten so used in Maya to just knowing that what I render in render view with Redshift is
Mm-hmm.
never going to look like what the final looks like. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you kind of get used to what it looks like in Maya, but then once you're done and you get somewhere else, you make
Yeah.
all these changes in post, and then when you look back at what it looked like out of Maya, you're like, oh yeah, that was really only 70% of the way there.
Totally.
But
Um,
with the time thing.
yes, Unreal can render like an 8K movie. You would have to use Movie Render Queue, which is like under Cinematics, Windows Cinematics Movie Render Queue. You can come in here and like I'll load my shots here. You kind of come in here. It tells you which sequence basically you're rendering, and then you can go to your output and you can change your size here for what you're rendering. It just
But I think that
takes
if you
longer.
render 8K, like, it doesn't have to render in tiles.
Yeah, there's a setting for high resolution, and
Hmm.
that basically is like the amount of tiles that you render. So it
Yeah.
basically renders 4 quads,
Yeah. So I know
or,
that there's
or
certain
usually.
things, I forget what now, but there's a couple things that I feel um, don't work when you render in tiles.
Hmm.
So I think there are limitations on rendering in tiles, but I'd have to look that up. I just remember some people tried to render larger at a higher resolution than their monitor,
Hmm.
and ran into a couple hiccups with that.
Yeah.
It could be like translucency related things or ray trace related things, where if you're,
Hmm.
ray tracing and rendering in tiles, I know there were some limitations. But mine, I just rendered at 2K because I figured who's going to ever watch this thing higher higher res 2K,
4K.
you
I did
know?
UHD as just like my 2 standard formats.
Yeah.
So I did. That was really it.
Yeah. I mean, in the long run, rendering 4K is smart because you'll probably be happy you did in a few years once all the
Yeah, at some
monitors are
point. Yeah.
15K.
It was mostly out of like the future, knowing that I probably want it to be
And
to
then it
be there
doesn't
for the future.
really slow down render. But, another
Yeah.
potential problem of rendering things higher res is that, like my project was made, like the texture resolution and texture space
Mm,
was kind of made to be rendering it at 2K. And
yeah.
if I had rendered it at 4K and looked at it at 4K, I probably would see texture problems.
Yeah.
And then
You're
all
like,
of
oh,
a
I
sudden,
gotta update this.
I need to up-res textures. So
Hmm.
I think that's something that, students, deal with, is that you do test renders at 1K and then you render at your final resolution and you realize, like, oh, all my textures are too low res.
Yeah.
So that is something that you kind of need to plan from the beginning.
That was actually why I liked using Mixer though
Yeah.
the most, was because Mixer you can just like work at your standard res, and you know, then when you just say
Mhm.
okay, like that's what I did. I textured everything at 2K. I'm opening
Yeah.
Mixer now, and then when I
Yeah,
was ready, if I wanted to upres them.
as long as the source textures are high res enough. Because if
Yeah.
you take something from Mixer that's a 4K texture and you only repeat it once on your
Yeah.
surface, then you wouldn't be able to export that as an 8K map because
No.
it's still just a 4K. But
Right.
what's cool is that if you take things from Mixer, like what you're saying, and you tile them a bunch of times, and that
Hmm.
source is 4K, you could technically export that texture way higher than 8K. It's just the limit is 8K.
Yeah.
Although I assume, I haven't used UDIMs and Mixer, but I assume it
I didn't
supports
either.
them.
Yeah.
Toby's asking if you're done with CryEngine.
Yeah. No thanks to CryEngine or Lumberyard. I'll pass on both of those.
Because
Middle.
Star Citizen was Lumberyard,
Mm-hmm.
which comes from CryEngine.
Yeah. Initially.
Yeah,
So this is
right.
like my hills in
That looks really
Mixer.
cool.
So I had just kind of, this is super simple, but this is the material that they had made that I just tinted blue,
Okay.
and it's tiling
Oh,
not
that's the
very
one.
often.
That's the one that you got from ArtStation.
Yeah, this is the one I downloaded from ArtStation.
Okay.
And then so I tiled it, and that was basically, I was like, oh, this is cool. You
Yeah.
know, at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you do start to see it, obviously. So I didn't tile it crazy high.
Yeah.
And then this
And
is
then
the
the snow.
snow.
Yeah.
And the snow is just from, I thought it was from above, but it's from below.
Okay.
And then just however much
Yeah, that's
pattern
right.
you wanted to see. And then I actually used the same material itself on this piece, which is the central piece. So there's like this one.
Uh-huh.
This one, that's the hills.
So when
This
you
one,
loaded that texture in from the one that you downloaded, did it come with a displacement map or just normal maps?
it has a displacement map as well.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
And you're using the displacement map that you downloaded in Mixer.
It should be, yeah.
Okay, got it.
So that's it, turning on and off.
I never found it, but I didn't look too hard. Is there a place to adjust the tessellation in Mixer for displacements?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I've
'Cause it
definitely
seems
seen
like
it
it's
rip
just
things apart.
I've seen that too. Because it seems like there's just that button in the upper left corner that's displacements on or off.
Yeah.
But as far as like what controls the amount of tessellation it does on the mesh, it seems like it's just using a single subdivision or two subdivisions.
Yeah. But yeah, so I kind of got lucky with what these looked like. But
Yeah,
it is a lot of time, like, finding, when you kind of said this before, but like when you're searching through Marketplace and you're searching through all this stuff, a lot of your time is just trying to find the right asset
yeah.
and deciding if you're going to make it yourself. Are you going to make it? Are you going to texture it? Are you going to, like, how are you building this thing? Are you just going to retexture something?
Yeah.
And then once you find it, it usually doesn't take too long because you're like, okay, this works now. I'm running with this and I'm continuing with this.
Yeah, it's the whole smart material thing where, when you, it's kind of a misnomer because it sounds like there is some AI or something going on with it where that's not the case. It's really just presets.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And, but the reality is it's just nice that it's so easy to be able to make presets and apply them to new meshes. And it's just very simple for texturing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then I used it a lot early. I was trying to find, this might take forever, but I used it a lot really early to just explore different textures on different parts. So I would use the layer, not layer sets, what's this called? The texture sets. And you could have like different, if you import an FBX, you could have different parts of it, having different textures on it. And so I would just try them on different parts of the hill, different parts of the building, different parts of the things, and just exploring what looks would be. And I was able to do that pretty quickly, actually, just because it's a little slow when you get into like all of the textures that you want. Like, this is not a very dense model, but you'll see as it loads all this up, it's also in the middle of loading, but I noticed that it wasn't the best at doing several
and is that like
textures at once.
4K on each mesh?
These are all 2Ks.
2K on each mesh.
So I was exploring, like, this is what the texture for here would be.
Yeah.
And this was fine, but then I would explore, like, and I would import all this into Unreal. So I was like doing a version that would be like this on this part, and then I would export this texture to Unreal. I would export this to Unreal, export this to Unreal, and just kind of see what it would all look like in the engine as far as which ones were working the best. Should I put snow on everything? That would kind of make sense. But then when I did that, it made everything disappear because it was all white. And you couldn't really see the object. So I used it a lot as just like a test bed as well for what would work and what wouldn't work.
Right.
So
yeah, I haven't tried doing multiple objects in Mixer yet.
It's efficient to get stuff in there, but it was honestly a little not efficient to
But you can
load.
hide whatever part of the mesh you're not working on, and I assume that would improve performance. So
you can hide the texture, but you can't hide the part of the mesh.
Oh, really?
You can do this thing, which is like you're working on that texture set,
Okay.
but it doesn't actually, as far as I'm aware, hide the mesh itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was
Mm.
kind of frustrating. Like I wanted to just focus on this door area,
Right.
and that would be its own area. I want to explore the difference between the door and the building itself, and then I couldn't do that, so I had to actually take the file
Mm-hmm.
because I had at a certain point textures I liked. Take the file and re-import the FBX. If you re-import the FBX that you had without everything else there, it still recognizes your initial texture sets, but you
Mm.
have like all these textures that you don't want. So that's like why these yellow ones are tagged yellow. So
Okay.
when I could basically come in here in my door file, so I re-import just the door and delete, 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 and it would still have everything else for the door and all that other stuff.
Okay.
And then I would do the opposite, and I would come in and delete the door and delete the hill and delete. So I had one file at one point that had the hill, the kind of tube that everything was being textured on, um, all the little walkway up here, the door, everything, the
Mm.
rocks on the side. And then I slowly, once I got like to a 10 to, that's way too low, 50% in where I'm like, this is kind of working, I just started splitting it out into lots of different groups.
Okay.
Yeah. But I like Mixer a lot. I think it's just super fast at being able
Mhm.
to, especially for environmental stuff, I think. Anything with rocks, anything with snow, anything with mud.
Yeah.
Like, it seems really, really, really great at that. Just bringing in.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's just all about the Megascan integration.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really what's so cool about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But Unreal is super fun. Definitely loved kind of getting to know it a little bit more and, well, a lot more. And,
Hmm.
like, to make something in it was fun. It's definitely probably going to be my renderer of choice if you kind of say it that way,
Yeah.
like to explore more world building, to explore just
Yeah. I mean, it seems,
environments, and
especially with Unreal 5, which I still haven't really played with yet,
yeah,
but that lighting is going to get a lot easier in there. So once you combine ray tracing and lumen and all that stuff, that I would
yeah,
imagine, because right now it's still pretty simple to take a mesh, just a simple single mesh over to Maya to render it with Redshift and just know that everything is
sure,
physically accurate.
mm-hmm.
But for an environment, I don't know. It just seems like it's just a lot more fun.
I think that's what it is the fun element.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I love sculpting in ZBrush, and if anybody who's watched before, I love doing that, but this is sort of a different thing where it's just a different, I don't know if creative muscle isn't the right word, but it's just a different experience
Hmm.
and just push everything a little further.
Now, do you think all the shots that you cut, are you going? Do you have any desire to keep working on this, or do you think it's done and you want to move on?
I think for right now it's done.
Yeah.
I would like to come back to it at some point, but I think that that's probably not really going to happen. Um, like I would at some point I would have loved to add all the things that I cut,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of happy with how it's its own small, very small thing, and I
Hmm.
don't really want to try to build it into a bigger element right now.
Right.
So for me, it was kind of almost like a teaser trailer, where it's like, do I want to build the teaser trailer into like a film or a short film? Mm, I would have to have add a lot to it to make it really make sense. I would almost just rework the whole thing and just keep
Yeah.
sets,
Yeah.
keep sets, keep the character, even though I'd probably want to make my own character, make a new
See,
ship.
that's the thing. That's like, with mine, where it's like, do I keep
Mm-hmm.
working on it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, yeah, then it's not so much adding, because adding to finish it is part of it, meaning the shots
Right.
that you didn't get to. But then if you want to start swapping out things like the character and the ship with your own, so that the project becomes more and more and more yours as opposed to kit bashed,
Sure.
then the time commitment will increase.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the same with mine, where it's just like, the character in mine is from Marketplace and it's cool and it
Mm-hmm.
works. But, if I was going to spend another 2 months on the short, there would come a point there'd be like, well, I wish I'd use that as an opportunity to make a character.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that gets into a rabbit hole. Now I have to
Yeah.
make one, and then I gotta rig it, and then I gotta,
Uh-huh.
So there's
That's
something fun
right.
about starting something new, also.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll
You know,
probably start something new. I
yeah.
haven't really put too much brain thought into it. It's, I mean, I'm sure Emmanuel or you or Miguel or Tran, everybody will say, like, I think after you go through it, you're just kind of mentally dead for a little bit. It's
Hmm.
fun. It's like a great experience to go into, but it's like a full-on time commitment for several weeks that you're
Yeah.
focusing on like just this one project,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's over.
Yeah.
Huh? I guess what am I going to do next? So I don't
But
know.
yeah, I mean, you've only been done for a week,
A week. Yeah.
so see where your brain's at in a month.
Mm-hmm.
Like I started, like on the streams, saying that I was going to keep working on the project and working on like the underworld and where he gets, and I worked on it a
Sure.
little bit, and then I got to a point that I was kind of like, maybe I want to just make stuff for fun for a second
Mm-hmm.
and not really worry about extending the short.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll eventually get to that. But because yeah, it's I don't know. It's like Unreal is something that you can make something relatively quick with. So like allowing what we did to just be a learning exercise is fine.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm happy with mine is. It's like I use this to learn
Uh-huh.
the software. I
Yeah.
feel pretty good about 6 weeks of learning time to learn
Yeah.
the software.
And then it's like, if you look at it from like us taking the fellowship as like term one of us learning
Mm-hmm.
Unreal, like if you're in school, then it's like once you're in term three, you don't really want to be using stuff you made in term one anymore because you've learned so
Mm-hmm.
much more and better ways to do things. So I kind of feel the same way. It's like,
Like I think for my next project, I want to try to address some of the things I was scared or knew would be big time sucks.
hmm,
Like I would like to bring in my own character.
yeah,
That would be probably step one.
yeah,
Um, I would like to make my project cleaner, that it could
hmm,
be maybe played in sequencer from
yeah,
beginning to end. I would like to make work on that.
yeah,
Um, I want to. I think the live link stuff, like the face stuff, is all really cool, and the mocap stuff is all really cool.
hmm,
Seeing, I didn't really do too much of that, obviously,
yeah,
and brought in other mocap, but doing custom mocap would be an interesting experience to try.
hmm,
Didn't do any dialogue, so bring in dialogue. Like I would want to play in some little areas here, but nothing like
yeah.
super crazy.
Pyramid, yes, irradiation is really cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing where like seeing irradiation, where it's something that a crew, not a small crew. It was Sava, and obviously he had help from a mocap facility, and he
Mm-hmm.
had assets from big, medium, small.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something where it's somebody who already had some experience with Unreal, is deciding to make a short and planning everything ahead, finding the mocap studio, working with
Mm-hmm.
Yama to get assets, and all of that is more, I think, the way we'd probably want to work moving forward, where it's just
Yeah.
it's planned out a little further as opposed to this mad rush because of the fellowship. And so I think that whether it's you or me or Miguel or Tran or anybody we know that are interested in making stuff, um, I think allowing the fellowship to be a learning experience and leaving it at that
Mm-hmm.
makes
I
the
agree.
most sense, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to try because, like, like all the creature stuff that Aaron Sims has been doing in Unreal that they've shared, little teasers of
Mm-hmm.
on their Unreal
Mm-hmm.
page. Like, obviously, we haven't tried any of that stuff, as far as
Yeah.
doing skin shaders. And, I'm curious because obviously the metahumans look really good, and I have
Mm-hmm.
not played with them. And from the point of view of taking apart how the skin shaders are done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just took, a character that you sculpted in ZBrush and brought it into Unreal, like how
How
easy
would that
or hard
work?
is it to get it to look as good as a metahuman?
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a good kind of test of like getting other things in, making sure they can look up to the quality. And I think that for better or for worse, when you start using Megascan materials, you
Hmm.
have like a certain quality bar that your other assets have to hit.
Yeah.
You can't have something that doesn't hit that quality of detail or shading sit next to it and look good because it just will look odd or look off or low res or something.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to make everything that comes in up to the same quality. And I think that's probably one of my next things is like getting a character into Unreal, different scene, maybe like a small diorama or something.
Hmm.
What I would love, and I wish that they had this, and maybe they do, and it's like a plugin or something. But uh, Marmoset Viewer has
Hmm.
that little like exporter where you can just export like that scene. That would be a really like a diorama. I would love to be able to do something like that if they can do that in Unreal, but I don't know if they can. To
Wait, say
just
that again, because I don't really know Marmoset.
oh sure,
So it's you can
um,
export a diorama.
yeah, basically like on ArtStation if you can kind of find them. Marmoset
Well,
Viewer,
I've seen things on ArtStation that are using their viewer
yeah,
just to be able to see a little scene in a web browser, right?
yeah, yeah. I would love to be able to do that, but with an Unreal scene.
Oh, okay.
Where you can kind of drag and like this is Marmoset's page, right? But you
Yeah.
can kind of move and check out their textures and
Yeah.
I want to see the whatever the albedos.
Yeah. That I've seen. It's very slick.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do this. And I'm sure at some point Unreal will do something like this. I just have a feeling, but where you could export like your small little thing. Like I don't
Hmm.
want to export a whole. I would love to be able to share Unreal things in a manner like this, where it could be like a small diorama or a small scene that people could
Yeah.
rotate around, almost more like a sculpture.
Yeah. But you can, I mean, they didn't teach it in the fellowship, but obviously with Unreal, you can export your level as a level that people can download and
Sure.
experience.
There's something about the web though that I like about this, where it's like, you can view it here, but I don't know if they can do that.
Yeah.
This is a cool one. I like this idea. They have a first-person shooter version.
So that's funny.
Some cool stuff. Yeah, it definitely helps out students checking out topology. Absolutely. That was something that I remember looking at. Like, how do people do their topology? How do they do their maps? How do they do everything like that in that viewer? It's really cool. It's just a different way to present. I think that was the biggest thing for me with the whole fellowship as well was like it was the first time like looking at my portfolio where it's a real image, it's a moving picture. And so I would love to bring more of that to my portfolio.
Right.
And so that's what I think I'm trying to brainstorm right now is like when I look at what I have, it's like obviously this is a movie and I can click on this and cool. But if these could be something similar that were movies or other ways to share that, that's kind of what I'm trying to brainstorm right now is how to best present something differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Toby, as far as Epic acquiring Sketchfab.
Sketchfab, that's true. Yeah, that's a good call. Because I think that would be a similar thing. I could just see that being really powerful for designers. I could see that being really powerful for, you know, pre-production, post-production. I could see it just being a powerful tool to be able to hand off something that's not in the engine to somebody to be able to view it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if there was a one-click way to go from what you're building in Unreal to a shareable web browser experience,
Mm-hmm.
that would be cool.
Pyramid Scheme asks, which software have you dropped completely using in the past 5 years? Which software package replaced it and why? Oh, that's interesting.
Hmm. 5 years. I mean, I used to use Onyx for trees, and I would never use
Mm.
Onyx again for trees
Mm-hmm.
because of Speed Tree.
Right?
And but completely stopped using is a little bit of a like use less is an easier thing to say than
Mm-hmm.
completely stop. Like Hedis UV layout, I used to use
Sure.
that to UV everything, and
Yeah.
Maya's UV tools have gotten a lot better. And so
Mm-hmm.
I now So I haven't used UV layout in a long time.
Yeah.
Not to say I wouldn't ever use it again, although I haven't used it in probably a couple of years. Because Maya's UV tools have gotten a lot better,
They're
and
significantly better.
significantly. And and then obviously ZBrush with UV Master. It's like between UV Master and Maya.
Hmm.
So yeah, so Hedis, Onyx, um, World Machine I could see getting replaced by Gaia and World Creator, because World Creator has, somebody mentioned on the stream a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of looked it up to see what they've added to World Creator, and they have added some cool new things to it. So I don't use it, but
Hmm.
it's software doesn't stop chugging along. So like trying to do, for my purposes, trying to make like fire or smoke with Maya fluids
Hmm.
at this point, like Embergen, I think once it gets out of beta, will probably replace my needs for it. Not
Hmm.
necessarily like big production house needs, but
Yeah.
more just like I need a torch in the corner.
Yeah.
Embergen makes it so easy to make that. Um, what about you?
I was trying to think about that. Um, I think one for me that's on the way out for me is Keyshot.
Yeah.
I've used it in the past 5 years, but it's it's a product renderer. It's good for quick drag and drop things, to
Hmm.
present a model efficiently and pretty.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many other things that are catching up or have caught up to like what it does really well, but
Mhm.
add on so
And
much
it's
more.
really expensive.
Yeah. They got really, they did a smart thing where they bridged it with ZBrush, so you
Hmm.
could get stuff there like almost instantly, which was the best part about it, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
It was the reason to use Keyshot in a way. It was
yeah,
just the one click.
over Octane, over anything else that anybody else was using at the time that
Yeah.
was similar product.
For ZBrush
Um,
specifically.
yeah, specifically,
Yeah.
and so that one is probably on its way out, just because I still like the bridge element of that, but it's such a limited. It's an IBL renderer basically. It's an
Hmm.
HDR renderer, and with some additional things you can add, of course, but there's only so much you can do with
But
that.
what would so what are you saying you would replace Keyshot with?
I've actually replaced it with Marmoset before, and I've
Hmm.
replaced it with. I would probably replace it with Unreal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I think both of
Marmoset has
those.
added, because that was the thing with a long time, is that Keyshot was a ray tracer,
Yeah.
and Marmoset was not. But Marmoset, which again I don't use it, but
Hmm.
it seems like in the last couple of years, didn't they just add ray tracing and a whole bunch of stuff to Marmoset? Probably. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Somebody
Somebody
just
just said it's
mentioned
RTX. Yeah.
RTX. So the quality of the renders out of Marmoset look really, really good now, and it's
Hmm.
I think it's a third the price of
It's
Keyshot.
super cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not very expensive. They're also continuously updating it. I think it's more in the entertainment space, obviously the games space.
Yeah.
So I think it's just better used for that. But I like that one, and that's probably the big. To answer the question, I would say Keyshot is the one I stopped using.
Yeah. 5 years ago, I was probably still using V-Ray, so I think it's in the last
Mm.
5 years that I switched to Redshift.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, 5 years in the world of CG is a good chunk of time.
yeah. It is. Yeah,
I'm
it is a
glad he
long time.
didn't say 20. Doesn't be like you're ready for a list. You went from this to this to this to that.
It's funny. But yeah, that's my project. I think that's the quick walkthrough without going through anything like, super deep or as far as I was building stuff. I guess I could open up some stuff in ZBrush or something. But
So, well, what did you make in ZBrush?
I sculpted the outside of this temple and like the exterior. So I'll load all that stuff up. I'll
Cool.
hide this for a sec.
Yeah. Pop Z just said any non-UDIM pipeline Mari isn't really used anymore. All Substance. Yeah, Substance Painter has become super, super popular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Mari is awesome though. I mean,
Yeah.
so I haven't used Mari in quite a while, but it's very intuitive and it's powerful, and um, it's obviously still used in, like you said, big UDIM pipelines, which is still a
Mm-hmm.
big deal in film production for high-end,
Oh
film
yeah.
projects that need ridiculous texture space on models.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, substance is obviously, it's funny. It's like 5 years ago, people weren't really talking about substance that much, and now
Mm-mm.
substance is everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, can you render stuff in Unreal like in a real render engine? Quote real. Well, I mean, you're rendering. I mean, you know, Josh mentioned movie render queue, which is like
Mm-hmm.
render globals in Maya.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you just click render and where you want your frames to go. And you have a bunch of settings for how it renders for things like anti-aliasing and, the quality of motion blur and the quality of your depth of field. And then you click render and it renders the frames out. So technically, yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
rendering frames for offline use. So you
Mm-hmm.
definitely can do that with Unreal. And the difference is that you're not going to have render times that are super long.
Yeah.
Um, How hard is cloth simulation? I had a bunch of things that had cloth, but I didn't set them up because I had flags and my character had a
Mm-hmm.
cape, but they were already set up. But by trying to deconstruct them a little bit, just to kind of
Mm-hmm.
understand how the flags were made and how the character's cape was made, it's actually really simple.
Mm.
So, because you just turn something into being a cloth object and it reacts to the wind node that's in the scene, and you can paint, it's kind of like painting weights in Maya. So, it's pretty straightforward, at least for the things I had in my scene, capes and flags,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I have seen some stuff people have been sharing online with, I don't know if it's a plugin for Unreal, for somebody who shared something with like MetaHuman cloth that
Mm-hmm.
it almost looked like Marvelous Designer type cloth stuff in Unreal, but I haven't used it. So, Sadim, good night. Sleep well. Yeah, it's funny right now, 4 o'clock. So yeah, I guess it's midnight in Europe and even later as you get further east. Path tracer is like oh, right. The path tracer is something that 427
Mm.
um, has, which seems like it's more, from what I saw in the demo, I guess more like a proper offline renderer.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like
Yeah.
I sculpted a ship somewhere, but I can't find it. But I'll show you what I had in ZBrush. Um, so initially I did. I'll share my screen now. I just did a rough block out. This is like that central column. And then like I did, the scale of this is a little off, but you'll see these kind of rocks.
Cool.
So I sculpted all this just with
Awesome.
some alphas.
Yeah.
And then this was where I realized that my scale issues would be causing me lots of problems,
Hmm.
especially in ZBrush. But because all of a sudden when I would get close to assets, they would get really... ZBrush does this thing where it has like this weird texture
Hmm.
when something is... I don't know if you can see it on your screen.
Oh,
It
yeah.
look
Yeah.
So because the outside is so big and the inside is so small, even this is just like a surface noise. This doesn't actually affect the sculpt.
Uh-huh.
Um, but because this is in the scene with it, it ends up causing all
But if
kinds of
you
issues.
hide the object, does that artifact go away? Or
No, you have to delete it.
yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. So I had to split it up. So this was like my initial sculpt that I did of just like, this is the central area. There's going to be some walls on the outside of this, which don't really do anything in here. And then this is like the block out for like, this is probably where they'd be going. And I
Uh,
just sculpted this as one kind of Dynamesh object,
okay.
just exploring shapes.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I did that, and then I built that out even further. So you'll see this is more like a more finalized version. I thought it would be interesting. I didn't get to showcase it and ended up just hiding it in the film itself. But to make this area feel more elusive or dangerous, that there would basically be like this system built into the middle where the whole column in the middle would spin. So the whole thing, whether the outside was spinning or the inside was spinning, it may be hard to tell, but it was always kind of rotating around you and where you were.
Okay, because
Like
yeah,
a,
you had one shot where I noticed that it
yeah,
looked like something was
something
moving,
kind
and I
of,
wasn't quite sure what.
that's what the intent behind that was, that this and all of this would
You
be
rotating.
rotating on top of this thing. But that would have had to have been established in previous shots through other
Right.
ways, and
Right.
just didn't really work.
Okay.
So I ended up hiding all of this. I ended up cutting out. Let me just see if I can find it. Is this one? There we go.
I have never used folders in the subtool palette.
They're, I guess, relatively new. I sculpted all this stuff though, so I brought this up to different levels. Some was just rough texture,
Mm-hmm.
or more detailed textures. As far as I started sculpting cracks and stuff like that, and then once I went into Mixer and just used
Yeah,
the
for sure.
material itself, I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
not worth the time to do high res normal maps to try to get it to be perfect, because the Mixer stuff will be fine.
Yeah.
But you can see I kind of explored some of that in these like side areas, as far as like having more architectural shapes in here,
Mm-hmm.
and just some more different types of things. I did end up doing, I'll hide this. So there was going to be a shot when you walk right in the room where there was sort of this like diamondy
That's cool.
room that would have like puddles on the floor. I cut all this. This is what the original overhead shot was going to be. They'd be walking into a room kind of like this with puddle and like liquid all over the floor.
Can you hear Scout?
Yeah, yeah,
He's,
yeah. He's barking at something.
he's having a nightmare. He's sleeping, and well, Lobo is like 2 inches behind my chair, dude.
Back up.
All right, Scout woke up.
So I almost did this, and this was going to basically go to a hallway, which would go to the large tomb in the inside. But I ended up cutting this
Okay.
once I did my animation pass, because I didn't know what they would do in here except for just walk through it.
Yeah.
I was like, this is just another sequence where they're going to be walking through a space, and they've just got in here, and it's very anticlimactic. So I'll cut this whole section out, and ended up not doing anything with this space.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely built things that I didn't use.
Yeah, for sure. And this is where it was, the size of the inside versus the size of the outside is very off. But
Did you like when you were in ZBrush? Did you feel like this intense pressure to hurry the fuck up?
oh yes, every
It's like
second
just being aware that like 95% of the people in the fellowship are
are
literally
not
just
doing.
downloading an environment from Marketplace,
Yes.
and that's their set.
Yes,
And
I
so
was so worried the
I was
whole
like,
time.
oh my God, like I don't have to be doing this. I could just download something from Marketplace. Why am I doing this to myself?
Yes.
And
So-
Thor looks cool.
Yeah. So I sculpted all this stuff. This is what a lot of this stuff is from the stuff I got from Pablo. So
Mm-hmm.
some cool textures on there. All this basically got overridden by the materials I used, but I thought it was fine. So
Yeah.
I ended up kind of just like accepting at a certain point what the outcomes were kind of looking like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what the textures from Mixer were looking like. Maybe wasn't my initial vision of it,
Yeah.
but it was cool enough that I was happy to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I did go.
Have you ever made an environment in ZBrush or environment and stuff like this in ZBrush before?
Not of this scale. I've made some props or like a statue and stuff like that before, but not like a whole location. So I was definitely kind of learning, like, am I going to need, like, what, I don't know what I'll need here officially, like what my pipeline would be, how much of that, if I was going to do it in like the very traditional game way or even film way of just doing a super high res map to
Mhm.
capture all that detail, it probably would have been fine. But then I felt like doing texturing would have been a very different process. Like I wouldn't have maybe used Mixer in the way that I would have used it, other than just like probably exporting to Bridge. So, but yeah, no, not really. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it turned out cool. Goblet asks, does Gnomon collaborate with the military? We've done training for vets. That's something you'd want to talk to admissions about, because I don't have the details on Gnomon's programs for that. But if you reach out to admissions, they'll be able to answer your questions on that. Ryan Hawkins, what's up, man?
Hello. Pixel Venture says, quick tip before starting a project on Unreal. It's good to understand how Unreal handles assets and management in folders. Yes. Yes, it is. That was something I think we learned in the fellowship, but it's sort of also like a learning process. And that's why like my file is a complete and utter disaster from that standpoint. Like there's way too much stuff in there.
Yeah, the first week was a lot of that, and experimenting. Because every program handles assets differently. But the thing that I do like about Unreal, as opposed to Maya, is the fact that like everything is copied into the project, and so whether it's a texture or a model, it's brought into the project. So that's really cool, but also really dangerous, because you bring something into the project that you're not going to use, it's still copied into the project, and then your project's bloating. But in Maya, you can import models and textures that are all over the place on your hard drive or on the network. And then if you try to package that up to bring to another computer or send to somebody else, it's a lot harder with Maya than with Unreal, because you'll end up having a lot of broken links, usually texture references, which, there's tools that can collect all that stuff into your source images directory with Maya. So I kind of like that Unreal was like that. That everything's just collected into the project. But then, I think that's where, when you're done with the project, trying to clean things up, sounds like you just take your level, I guess, and export it to like a clean project.
Yeah, like migrate it out or something.
Yeah, I guess so.
Seems like it. I don't know if this is big or not, but my project ended up being like 30 gigs.
Oh, that's bigger than mine.
Is it?
I think mine was I don't know. I think it ended up being around like 15 to 20. Still pretty big.
Yeah, I have a lot of gigs of renders of image sequences.
Yeah.
A lot of those. Oh, hello.
Ryan, you got your Gnomon workshop? I'm wearing the workshop t-shirt. Yeah. Josh, you got one of these, didn't you?
I do. I'm not wearing it, but I have my cup around here. Maybe it was behind me.
Yeah, I saw Maddie for the Concept Art Awards.
Yeah.
had the cup like
right here.
Background.
Yeah, that was perfect.
That was awesome.
It's upstairs. I was drinking out of it earlier.
Yeah. It's that cup. If you put hot water in that thing, the handle just goes to the temperature of whatever's in it.
Oh, so be careful.
It's dangerous.
That's good. Yeah. ZBrush is kind of back. Well, I think we've mostly talked about this for like 2 hours or so.
Yeah, but it's cool.
Yeah. As far as making stuff today, it seems like we're mostly just doing a postmortem. But
yeah,
if there's any questions from the chat about anything,
yeah, for sure. People have been fairly quiet. Do you have anything that you feel like making today?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. I was probably just going to either sculpt something randomly and just kind of get back into that. I haven't sculpted a character in a long time now, it feels like. Going back into my comfort zone, even though, Ryan, as you're saying, happy to see me step outside of my comfort zone. I haven't been in my comfort zone for a while, so maybe do that.
Nice. Well, I think I'm going to go and grab some coffee real quick.
Yeah, sounds good.
And I'll be back in a couple minutes. One nice thing with having the shorts is every time I would take a coffee break, I'd be like, I'm just going to play the short for 3 minutes. Go grab a coffee. But
mine is slightly shorter than yours, but we can do that real quick because I have to use the bathroom. So we're going to play my short. We'll be back.
Awesome. See you in a couple minutes.
Bye. Oh, hello again. All right, I'm going to pull up ZBrush here and get started sculpting for myself. I'm just going to use one of those base heads, the head planes. All right. All right. I haven't sculpted anything for a little while, so I'm going to just kind of jump into this. If in case you've never used this before, you can find this in the projects folder up in the Lightbox section of this under head planes, project head planes. So turn on my dynamic brush slider now that I'm not sculpting at an incredibly massive scale. Just get started. And try to shake off some rust. What do you think separates Clarice IFX from Unreal? I'm not as well versed in Clarice, but I think Unreal, if you're talking about generally, is just, I think it's got a lot more money behind it and it's more capable. It's just very different. Have I seen the 21.7 update? Yeah, I haven't upgraded yet just because I've been busy. And what I'm going to be doing today is not going to have anything very fancy.
What a mess.
Nothing really.
You're making a head.
I'm starting with a head today. Just jumping back into the comfort zone, back into project I would normally. Just going to start from scratch. We'll see where it goes.
Comments on the scandal at Blizzard. Since I always mention working for them, Alex. I never worked for Blizzard. I've known a lot of people that have worked for Blizzard, and we have a ton of grads at Blizzard.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the scandal at Blizzard, I assume you're referring to the sexual harassment stuff going on over there. And obviously, there's what, 8,000 people at Activision and 3,000 people at Blizzard or something like that. So I think, clearly it sounds like some people were kept around way longer than they should have been, and that kind of thing isn't acceptable. So, I think every company is going to unfortunately hire somebody that is a jerk, and it's happened at Gnomon. Years ago, we hired this dude that on the first day started hitting on staff, and people started complaining. And then the second day started going, like by the third day, every single female employee almost at Gnomon had been hit on by this guy. So he was fired on his third day. And it was shocking. It was just like, what is wrong with this person? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, it is something that happens, and it shouldn't. And so, but I think that when you have a company of 3,000 people, I can't imagine that, a certain percentage of the population are jerks. And you can interview to your heart's content. People are still going to get in that are bad apples. And you got to hope that you have systems in place so that people feel comfortable reporting on those people so that they can be reprimanded and ultimately fired if necessary. And I don't really know the details of what happened at Blizzard, but it sucks when you hear those stories, especially for a studio that I think a lot of us love, because I've been playing their games for 25 years. and I'm a huge fan of Diablo and StarCraft, and I've spent thousands of hours playing WoW. So you don't want to hear those kind of stories,
Mm-hmm.
and but I think that they happen, you know, in all sorts of industries, unfortunately. And it seems like they've taken action now, and you just got to hope that that means that there will be change at Blizzard, because they are going to continue to make great games. They're a big company. They have a lot of money, and so that's the hope, is that it you know that this is something that they will deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it sucks. I don't think it's going to be the end of Blizzard. I mean, it's you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. I mean, they're not going anywhere. So, but they lost some high-profile people. I think wasn't like the head of World of Warcraft one of the people that got left.
Oh, I don't know.
I think so. So yeah, I mean, Ryan just commented it on also. It's it's big studios like that also have like lots of teams that are working on different projects, different departments, because obviously you have, the game artists, but you also have the developers and the marketing people, and like there's so many different departments and so many different experiences that people can have, um, especially at studios like that are big. You look at a company like Accenture, they've got 500,000 employees. you
Right.
know if you assume that 1% of the population is a jerk, then 1% of 500,000 is a lot of people. Like from an HR perspective, their HR department must be massive to deal with those people that have problems. But yeah, I think you just gotta hope that Blizzard can continue to make good games in an environment that is inclusive and supportive and makes people feel comfortable. It is an industry that's been male dominated for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when Gnomon started, I think we were 10% women. And now I think we're approaching 40%. So, and I think, Gnomon is, schools that are trained in this stuff are sort of indicative of what the studios will be like. That meaning that people are in school before they end up in a studio.
Mm-hmm.
And so back when Gnomon started and we were 10%, some studios were less than 10% women.
Right.
You know, um, Blizzard Cinematics 10 years ago, I think, like I had an ex who ended up working in cinematics. And when she got hired, she was the only woman out of 150 artists.
Wow.
Um, but I know that the percentage of women has increased over the last many years in the industry, and it's
Mm-hmm.
depends on where you go to. Like feature animations always had a lot more women than VFX, but I think it's changing for the better. So I think that Gnomon's student population is not 50-50 yet, but we're over the last 20 years heading in that direction, which I think is important.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. It's like back when I used to teach a lot. If I had a class that was, I've told the story before, but like if I had a class that was all dudes, it would always
Mm-hmm.
be like super serious. And everybody would just be like focusing on their projects but on the occasions where I would have classes that would be 50-50, the energy was always so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel it's just more natural to have a, diverse set of people that will be able to, I don't know. I went to an all boys high school. I hated it. Oh my God. It's horrible. I just had so much more fun when I went to, co-ed elementary and middle school. It's just, I don't know what it is, but I think it's important. So I think the industry is heading in a better direction, but there's still a lot of work to do for sure.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about Clarice.
I'm not super well versed in Clarice. Are you? Or you?
We have titles on Clarice in the No One Workshop library, and I've talked to at THU was a dude from ILM who was using Clarice on a bunch of shots for Star Wars at the time.
Hmm.
I think that Unreal 5 with Nanite and Lumen is going to start getting Unreal to be able to be seen as maybe a Clarice replacement.
Mm.
Because Clarice's whole thing is its ability to handle huge data sets, like billions of polygons and millions of instances um, interactively. And that's something that, as we know, Maya's viewport isn't great at.
Right.
And so Clarice was, written from the ground up, I guess, to be able to handle that. So for massive environments, like you would see in anything from like an exterior in Star Wars to things like Avatar, which, the Avatar sequels, I wouldn't be surprised if they're using Clarice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but because it really just has to do with, being able to hit billions of polygons, and that's what Clarice is good at. But from what I understand with Nanite, there's still limitations.
Mm.
Like I don't think Nanite, it's not really a proxy system. You're just loading in heavy geometry, and it's got its own kind of internal proxy system in a way. But from what I understand, it doesn't work with translucency.
Hmm.
And so, meaning you can't turn trees into nanite objects.
Mm.
And so that's an issue, obviously, if you want to be able to bring hero
Yeah.
trees from Speed Tree that are like 500,000 polygons or a million polys for one tree. I guess at the moment for nanite, that's not something that you'll be able to do, because obviously translucency is a huge part of leaves and leaf
Yeah.
shaders. Um, so yeah, Ryan just commented also that nanite doesn't work on skeletal meshes. So I think if we need things in motion, Clarice might work better. So yeah, if you were doing something like massive, where you're dealing with like tens of thousands of animated characters that need to be replicated via some kind of proxy system, that's not a nanite feature yet either. So I think Clarice is probably going to continue to be popular for a while. So it really depends on where you want to work. Like if you want to be an environment artist at ILM working on AAA, big budget features, and learning Clarice is probably still a good idea. But Clarice, even though I haven't used it, I've just scanned the Gnomon Workshop titles that we have. It seems pretty straightforward because it's
That's
basically
cool.
a scene assembly tool.
Right.
But as opposed to Unreal, it doesn't have nearly as many tools as Unreal has, because Unreal is also a game engine. And so Clarice is really more import your models, lay them out, light them, render. Your head's looking pretty cool, pretty fast.
It's all the base mesh. Just starting with a good base.
Ryan, I have not used Houdini, but Unreal, yeah. Because I did the fellowship before Josh did. So like I did it and then Josh did it a few weeks later. So Unreal, yeah. Houdini, no. Just because even though, we have a lot of Unreal, or rather Houdini classes at Gnomon, because our effects track is Houdini centric. Maya and Houdini, but there's a ton of Houdini classes that are in the effects track. So for effects artists, or Houdini obviously is amazing. But for what I do, I haven't really felt the need to use it until maybe the last year, where like we're seeing more and more people doing environment stuff with Houdini, because it's got all these cool procedural tools, and then they've added terrain tools and erosion nodes and things that are starting to look more and more like stuff you can do in World Machine or World Creator or whatever, which is tempting, but I don't know. There's too many programs. So for now, I think I'm happy with, the programs I'm using, because I know that learning Houdini is not like a quick
Overnight thing. Yeah.
Ryan, you're in Barcelona? I thought you were in Sweden. Weren't you? Although I have to say that Barcelona sounds like an upgrade. Only because I don't like cold weather. Yeah, Sweden, because Sweden's where Griffin wants to go for art school, possibly. and I don't think he realizes how cold it is there. The school looks cool, and it's got cool teachers, but it is in Sweden, so if that's where he chooses to go, he's going to have a very cold winter.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you're at a Korean company that's based in Barcelona, or they have a division in Barcelona. But Barcelona is great. I've been there once, and I can't wait to go back. Barcelona was just beautiful and cool, and the food was amazing, and the energy, and just the late nights there with the whole like siesta and people going out to dinner at 10 o'clock and the streets being full of people at midnight. Man, just there was an energy in Barcelona that I really, really liked, you know.
Mm.
And God, the food was good.
Always helps.
Oh man, just the whole tapas thing, because I've always been like more an appetizer person than like an entree person.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather order like 5 appetizers than 1 entree.
Hmm.
It's just the whole variety thing, and like, you know, Korean food and like Spanish food are both that. You know, you
They're
just get
perfect for
lots
that.
of
Yeah.
plates. Yeah, and so like tapas is for me. Like that's just like give me like a little, you know, a little bit of cheese, a little bit of ham, a little bit of, you know, those little croquette things that they make. Yeah. Pixel Venture simulations and Houdini. Oi, Houdini needs real-time sims. Yeah, that's like when I started playing with Embergen a few months ago. I was just like, yeah, maybe I'll, you know, for my needs, that was like a dream tool. As like, you know, well, maybe I should learn Houdini one day so I can do a better job of making my own VDBs for like smoke or fire. And learning Houdini was something I kept thinking like maybe I'm going to have to learn that one day. And then Embergen kind of answered that because it's real time,
Hmm.
which is cool. Um, Marion, at some point I was happy when I discovered new software for 3D. At the moment, it's so much that I feel a little overwhelmed. I hear you on that. I totally hear you on that. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
But, you know, you got to focus on learning the tools that you need for work. So, you know, if you have a job and, you know, you're a modeler, then just stay on top of the modeling tools.
Yeah.
You know, anything that makes you faster is going to be fun because it's always fun to get faster. And that's kind of what happens is new tools come out and they make you faster. So uh, focus on that as opposed to feeling like there's so many things I don't know, and it's fine. Like I wish I knew Houdini. I don't. I wish I knew Clarice. I don't. I wish I knew World Creator. I don't. I could make a list of tools that I wish I knew. But yeah, it's like you got to pick your battles. You know, it's like I wish I knew Substance Designer. I don't, but now I know Mixer, and I learned that over the fellowship, and I'm happy that I now know Mixer. And maybe one day I'll play with, you know, but you can't. Nobody expects you to know everything, so don't work yourself up too much over it. But I've felt that way too.
Yeah, totally.
Image junkie, Alex, with your knowledge of 3D, what is the best file format to prefer? FBX, OBJ, Alembic, etc. I figure it has to do with the program, which is true. But what are the stories behind these formats? So I couldn't tell you the stories behind them so much, but you know, USD is like the new one that everybody's talking about, and you know, the new version of Maya 2022, has got a bunch of USD integration. So if you Google up USD as a file format, you're going to see a lot of people talking about that as an interchange format for scenes, as a scene description language for getting files to more easily go between programs. FBX was kind of that, but from a few years ago as a exchange format. So FBX is kind of my preferred, and I think a lot of people's preferred file format at the moment. And so FBX is what I was using to go between Maya and Unreal, for example. It's what I started to use to go between ZBrush and Maya, because I used to be using OBJ, but then there is an FBX import-export plugin for ZBrush, and that works really well. But for years, I'd always just use OBJ when using ZBrush. But the FBX plugin is cool.
It's pretty solid, yeah.
Yeah. And then Alembic. Alembic caches are a thing that, you know, I haven't needed to do, but that's for like sending If you have like a big sim from Houdini of destruction and you want to get that into Unreal, then that's going to be an Alembic cache. So it kind of depends what you're doing and what programs you're using. And the same goes with like, image formats. There's a million image formats.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but I would say image chunky, just, stick with FBX whenever you can and you'll be fine. But it depends what you're doing. Yeah, Marianne, OBJ is totally solid. I still use OBJ all the time. Like if I'm sending a piece of geometry from, A to B to C, like I'm fine with OBJ. It's just since I started using Unreal and FBX was, heavily promoted by Epic as the tool to use to go from Maya to Unreal because of the fact that it handles scale and your up axis auto rotation. That's where I was like, all right, I'll just start using FBX, and then that's starting to get me to use FBX for more stuff. But OBJ is what I've always kind of used. They both work. Goblet, it's just for you to recommend Blizzard as a workplace to aspire to work for years, and you had no idea of the work environment there. I forgot the context of that, but yeah, the work environment at different studios also changes over time. Blur is a place that used to be considered a very intense place to work. Hydraulics used to be considered a place that had a lot of overtime. Those places got better over the years. So, it's a snapshot in time isn't necessarily going to be true in the future or true for the past. So the best thing to do is talk to people that work at a studio that you're interested in working for. And if you talk to somebody and they say, don't work here, I'm about to leave, it's a nightmare, then listen to that.
Yeah.
But, Blizzard, like Disney, ILM, Weta, it's a big household name, and a lot of people are going to want to work at those places. And they're going to have a ton of applicants lining out the door because there are people that want to work on Diablo or people that want to work on Star Wars. So I think that a place like Blizzard, though, is susceptible to damage from bad press, and that's a good thing because it makes them, have to respond to things that happen. It's starting to get harder to stay on top of the comments. Just like, all right. Ryan, you started a new AAA console company with two other guys, a designer and a programmer, which is awesome. Open world game with UE5.
Cool.
Art director from Assassin's Creed, narrative director of Fallout, Horizon Zero, and Mortar. 45 people from around the world. Barcelona is just the backdrop for our studio. Just the backdrop. A pretty nice backdrop, dude. California of Europe, totally. When I went to Barcelona. I've been to Madrid twice, and I've been to Barcelona once, and did a road trip. Drove from Spain to Italy, and Spain definitely reminded me of California. Just the geography of it, and the trees, and the plants, and the climate. It definitely had a California vibe for sure. But man, that sounds awesome! Congrats, dude.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really, really cool. Smilegate. Make the #1 FPS played profitable game in the world and are making a new game now to challenge Diablo called Lost Ark. Cool. Well, anything that's Diablo-like, I'm into. I'll definitely be playing Diablo 2 in a couple of weeks when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Ash Blossom. Substance designer is difficult, but after 5 days, you're getting used to it. Awesome. I do really look forward to being able to play with that one of these days. I just love node-based tools. Goblet, what kind of coffee am I having? I am having a donut shop Keurig coffee pot. All right, I got to Google Lost Ark. Googling. The screenshots look cool.
It's Unreal 5.
That's what he said. Yeah, it
That's
definitely
cool.
has an isometric Diablo vibe. The graphics look awesome. There's a painting for it that has a very Craig Mullins vibe. Yeah, it looks really cool. All right, wait. So now I'm how to go back to Lost Ark is Unreal 3. The new IP is Unreal 5.
Oh, I see.
Smilegate. That's a funny name for it. It's very friendly. Oh, your head's looking awesome.
Thanks. Just trying to dial it in a little bit by little bit.
When was the last time you 3D printed something?
For Griffin.
Cool.
For myself, not a little bit back before that. The fellowship totally absorbed me and I didn't have time. I was like, had all these ideas. I was like, oh yeah, I'll make my own ship and then I'll 3D print my own ship and that would be awesome to like have something from a short that I also. And then no, I don't have time to do that right now.
Yeah. What's the news with Star Citizen? Have you kept on top of that at all?
I haven't too much. I think it's still being worked on. I get push alerts or stuff in my Google feed every now and then. It's some new versions or something like that was still being worked on or being released or something. But I haven't heard anything about like their single player game, or I don't know if there's much updates on that side. Normally, that stuff kind of, if there's a big release, it seems to like invade your feed, where it's like, oh, you're almost, oh, there it is. But I haven't seen anything in a little while.
There was some headline the other day, recently, the last week, about, I guess they got sued by, I don't know if it was a class action or a government or something about like selling ships that hadn't been made yet.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was upset about that and sued them.
It's kind of the whole business model.
Yeah, I guess they sell stuff kind of like before it's made just to raise money, or I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
like a concept sale.
Concept
S-
sale. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so if something is, a new ship, they're going to make a new ship, they'll make concept art for it, and then they'll sell that to generate interest for it, to fund it, to, you know, it's kind of the part of the business. So it's interesting that people would be suing over the way it's been running since the very beginning. Maybe they're like, maybe one of them didn't go or something. Like something didn't get made, maybe.
I guess so. Or it was just taking too long.
Yeah.
'Cause how many ships do they have? Do you know?
Over 50, I think. It's a good amount. But I'm not sure about the specific number. And a lot of them are flyable.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, Ryan, no, that's cool. And if you ever want to join Josh or I on one of these streams, you're more than welcome. Just
Mm-hmm.
hit me up on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be fun.
If you feel like being on the spot for a couple hours. I'm just going to ask questions about the food in Spain. So
There you go.
Ryan
At least
said, I
you know what
think
to expect.
when hiring for my team, it's a person first and personality. Work is second. I agree with that
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, it's like we're always hiring based on that. You assume that the portfolio is fine because that's what got the interview to happen. So you obviously do some checks to make sure that what's in the portfolio they actually did. But once you're past that and you're confident that they have the skills, then really the big thing is like, you know, said it many times on the stream, but like, would we like to hang out with you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at hiring as like picking friends, it's like, especially at a smaller studio, when you have places like I was saying earlier that have thousands of employees, it's harder for them to, necessarily look at it that way completely. But for places that are under 100 people, I think that it's very important. It makes the experience more fun for everybody if you're culturally have everybody getting along. Like if we hire somebody and in the first week we see them like going, obviously pre-COVID, but like going out to lunch with like the other people from Gnomon, then that's awesome. But if we hire somebody and we see that they never go out to lunch, they always sit at the desk, everybody's going out in groups and they just never go out, they never seem to be talking to anybody, then it makes other people uncomfortable because it's like, well, does that person not like us, or why does that person want to hang out with us? And it just creates tension, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing because sometimes those people just are shy and it needs to come around. But the point is that the idea that the people who are working together like each other and can build friendships and build relationships just makes the workplace better. And none of that has to do with how good of a modeler you are, or
Right.
it's just so we ask, we want to know things like, do you play games? Do you run into movies? What's your favorite this or that? It's like, you just ask questions you would ask of a new friend that you're meeting and see how they answer that stuff.
It's definitely one of the more, it's the intangibles. It's like, I agree with what you're saying. Like if somebody gets on, if they're good enough to get an interview, if their quality of work is good enough to get an interview, then the rest of it is really just people. It's
Hmm.
who are you as a person?
Yeah. The worst thing in the world is drama, and that's the main thing you're trying to avoid. So always check references on people when you're hiring. And avoid, one tip on hiring with references, if you check the references somebody gives you, you know that that's going to be a good reference because they gave you the reference.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it would be pretty weird for somebody to give a reference where they think that that person doesn't like them and is going to say something bad about them. So whenever I can, I try and just go on LinkedIn to see if I know somebody who has worked with that person, or like I'm connected through somebody else to that person. And I'll just directly call that person and say, hey, have you worked with this person? So that you're finding your own references instead of using the ones they give. And that way you can kind of try and get a more honest perspective on the person you're looking to hire. Asseryen, you were looking at the fellowship. It seems awesome to join. You should apply. Looks like they're going to be doing
Definitely.
it for a while. Sounds
Definitely
like they get a
apply.
lot of applicants, though. Hmm?
Yeah, definitely apply. But yeah, I think they get a ton of applicants.
But it's definitely an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done many portraits, like where you're trying
Of
to
people,
do? Yeah.
very few. Never really had to, because whenever I was working at Marvel or at Legacy, where you were doing, I'll go through all my jobs, I guess. Legacy, we did a lot of scans. We didn't need to do the portrait of the person because we would either get a scan or a life cast of the person, and there was never really a reason to have like a really high res quality portrait.
Yeah.
Um, at Naughty Dog, all that stuff was hand sculpted, but it was never based off of a single person.
Right.
You might use some of that person's likeness or elements of it in the character, but it was never. So I sculpted heads, but they weren't like a person. And then Marvel was kind of the same as Legacy. Like we didn't have I would get a scan of Chris Hemsworth or Chris Evans or Chris Pratt, one of the many Chris's, and just use that as what you would build something on.
Mm-hmm.
And then Star Citizen, all of those heads were scanned. They were actually using the same company, Three Lateral, that the metahumans were based off of. So it was kind of, but there was never a need to sculpt like a portrait of a person. I did it a couple times at Gnomon or just for fun for like fan art, but I only a little bit of people like actual humans. I did one for Art Jam earlier this year with Jay Hill.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I sculpted what is his name? Jackie Earl Haley, which is the actor who played Rorschach in Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. That was only like a 3-hour portrait.
Yeah, it seems like as an exercise, it's so difficult to do.
Oh yeah.
Because very, very few people are good at doing, regardless, like if you're talking about like life drawing, life sculpture, life painting, or go into the computer with ZBrush. It's something that, like I did a couple years of life drawing when I went to Art Center, and you're always drawing for models. But the amount of students where the drawing, like a lot of students, the drawing or the painting looked like a person and might have been a really cool drawing or painting. But was it a perfect likeness? Very rarely. Like very
Right.
few people were able to get it to be a perfect likeness, right? Because that just requires a level of precision that's just very, very difficult to do, especially when you have a model that's moving around and stuff like that. But there's certain people like Michael Husser, who's an amazing painter, who not only makes insane paintings, but he's amazingly good at capturing likeness, right? So it's just it's two different things, right? that are related. And so on the digital side, it's so difficult to make it. And we are like, if we're really familiar with a face, it's so easy for people to spot that it's a little off. And
Yes.
that's why I think scanning from a professional perspective is why, like, you go to Gentle Giant, they have this like wall plaque that's full of heads that they've
Yeah.
scanned, famous people. And like the reason they'll send an actor to Gentle Giant to get scanned is because because scanning exists
Hmm.
and it's going to be perfect.
It'll be perfect, and it's better than having somebody sculpt it from scratch, from reference, especially if it's going to be a movie or a game or something, and be off. Because everybody will know that it's off. Everybody will, like, the internet will explode if they see a likeness be off in a game, or they'll be like, that just doesn't look right. Like, it just isn't worth it, I think, from that angle. And then from the artistic standpoint, like, it's not going to, well, what is it? Especially if you're trying to do a digital double or something, like, what is it going to bring you to
Mm-hmm.
sculpt it from scratch? There's not like a real reason
Yeah,
to do that.
it's an exercise. Chris Costa's crazy good at it.
Oh yeah, there's some people who are great at it. It's like definitely what they've spent a lot of their, focus on. Um, but
Yeah, he just did that H.R. Giger portrait, which is
oh yeah,
really, really impressive. Yeah. Goblet, you asked about students, or does Gnomon recommend students to Blizzard? It's like, well, Gnomon's been around 25 years, so over that period of time, we've had tons of grads go to Blizzard because obviously
hmm
grads want to go to Blizzard and have for a very long time. I think I don't know how many grads we have at the moment at Blizzard, but it's been as high as 30, meaning currently working at Blizzard. Right now, I don't know what the number is. So, and I know that since in the last 3 months, we've had a couple grads start at Blizzard, meaning female grads have started at Blizzard in the last couple months post the scandal. So
hmm
I think that if students apply where students want to apply. Our placement department is going to work with them to help introduce them to recruiters, make sure that their portfolio is ready. But obviously, places like Blizzard, ILM, et cetera, are the hardest places to get into. Most students don't end up at a AAA studio as their first job,
Right.
So even though we've had grads go to ILM straight out of Gnomon, it's not something that is the norm. Usually you'll end up at places that are a little smaller, like Luma or Pixelmondo or Blur, or places that are still amazing studios. They just don't have this line of 1,000 people out the door like Blizzard might. Um, and but yeah, it's something where the student has their own responsibility as an adult to decide where they want to apply and where they want to accept a position from. We're just guiding them through introductions and portfolio prep is what Gnomon's responsibility really is, to make sure that their portfolio is ready to apply to studios and get the job that they want to have. So it's kind of, how that works. Pixel Venture says it sounds like we're in a medieval game. Yes, it does.
About to start our adventure in our tavern.
Yes, Josh is sculpting the barkeep. Been in a couple brawls. He's
Oh,
also
for sure,
down
yeah.
there.
There you go. Josh says he does not draw. That is correct. I don't draw very often, at least, and if I do, it's more for myself. I don't. I think that's for me. It's an area of weakness that I've wanted to focus on for a long time, but I also, it's hard for me to really want to go back to that because I can sketch in 3D at this point. So, for example, for me to draw one angle of what I've sculpted here in this head would take me much longer than it would
Yeah.
for me to sculpt this head. So I think that's where I've kind of found myself at, just feeling more comfortable sketching and sculpting and using that as my medium of choice.
Alex
I used
F1's
to be.
asking if you've ever done a sculpt of yourself.
I have never done a sculpt of myself. I've done scans of my head. I remember at Gnomon, actually, we did a session in our character modeling class. We went to a field trip where we got our head scanned, and then we had to retopologize our head with good topology. And that was really weird, seeing my head in like what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
You're always like, oh, that's so weird. It's so, I don't know. Like, I'm not necessarily somebody who enjoys looking at myself on camera or hearing my voice,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So seeing your like the true accurate representation of your head was
That would be
actually
weird.
really unsettling for me. I was like, I don't think I want. I don't know if I want to do this assignment, but I'll do it.
Yeah,
That's
I've
the
never
only
had
time I've ever done like a
that.
self-portrait. I've drawn myself in art classes for doing a self-portrait, but not sculpted in a long, long time.
Yeah, I had to do that in high school. I had to do it once, and then in art school, I had to do a couple self portraits. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Griffin had to do one. He's done a couple
Mm-hmm.
for school, which he wasn't crazy about having to do.
Yeah.
But then there's some people. There's this guy, Andrew Jones,
Mm-hmm.
who was a concept artist, and now he does like really really amazing like art installations, and he's like kind of like the Corel painter guru wizard. He's just an amazing artist who's been in the industry for, I'd say, at least 20 years. Really talented
Mm-hmm.
dude. And I remember back in conceptart.org days, way back when, he had a thread there where it was like a self-portrait a day,
Ooh.
and he did, I want to say he did thousands of them,
Wow.
and over the course of years, and they were all traditional media, and they were amazing, and just seeing them get better and better and better over
Mm-hmm.
time, and all these different styles he was using.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty sure if I do a Google search for Andrew Jones self-portrait, he also goes by Android Jones, which is probably what I should be. There you go.
Yeah. There you go.
Andrew Jones, 1,000 self-portraits. There's a video on YouTube from 10 years ago. But yeah, there's so many styles. He's he's in the whole NFT thing now.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was an installation that I saw downtown. That there's like a dome theater downtown that is pretty cool. That I went to a couple of years ago, and they had a big installation that Andrew Jones of his paintings. They were prints. Anyway, some people love doing self-portraits, I guess is my point.
Yeah, absolutely. I see, Ryan, your comment about on the Division, you said you had a character artist unknowingly, accidentally sculpt a likeness of himself into a character. I have definitely seen that before. Because I think people have like a sort of natural tendency to, like you're saying, look at yourself in the mirror. And so people, a lot of the time, their characters will look like themselves to an extent. Whether it's fan art, whether it's self-portrait, whether it's another character they're trying to make, like they'll accidentally put that in there.
That's funny. Ian McKegg says that he always has a mirror,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's a little bit of himself in all of the sort of male faces that he draws.
Yep.
The Division,
I think it's just like
that was a cool game.
yeah, totally. I think there's just like especially if you're not using a lot of reference or very close-up reference, like I'm not going to get in deep and evaluate this character right now, but there's probably parts of this that look like me because that's what I'm used to looking at. So it's like, I'm making an eyeball, I'm making an eye, and you're like, oh, I'm making an eye. Rather than, so you just sculpt the one that you've probably looked at the most, which is the one that you've seen in the mirror.
It's funny.
I have noticed that if I don't sculpt with like a lot of reference, that the heads, I could probably pull them from like the past 5 years, and they will have, especially if I'm making a generic human male,
Yeah.
like a generic white human male, which is what I made, they will all look roughly the same. Like I
Right.
could probably get a bunch of them, and they would be similar-ish.
Yeah.
Some of
Makes
that's
sense.
probably like the proportions like that you're supposed to learn, it's like where things should go. So they all kind of hit the same spots. But it is kind of funny when that happens.
But that makes sense because it's, I think it's just like how you can very easily spot, a creature by Carlos Fuente. It's like people just
Mm-hmm.
have form languages that they use over and over again. And
Yeah.
if you don't use reference, you're just going to do what's in your head and
Let's see what
repeat.
this one is. This is another one I made. There's similar shapes here.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's like definitely some. This is I
The
just
eye,
randomly picked a file.
yeah, the lower eye bag is like very similar on both of them.
Yeah. Some of this big shape coming in. So it's just interesting. That's what people default to. When you're not trying to go for something. That's why reference is actually super important, especially with faces or portraits or something that you have a lot of good reference for them. Which is awesome. Looks like probably Adam posted the link to our Friday instructor spotlight. There's an Eventbrite link there if you want to sign up for that, register, get notifications on that. Go ahead and click that in the chat and whatever you're in.
And that's with Martin
And
Hall, who's been teaching in Gnomon
yeah,
for years. He's an amazing compositor.
he's incredible. I had him for class. He was great. One of my favorite
Yeah,
teachers.
awesome.
He's a
Yeah,
good
nice,
guy.
cool guy, compositor, and has been doing a lot of VFX supervising for the last few years as well. So that should be pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, it is 5:00. We've made it.
Amazing.
Well, thank you everybody for joining the jam today, checking out the project. If you have any questions on that, feel free to ask them, whether it's my social media, whether it's anybody else's social media or Gnomon's, and we can talk about that stuff at some point. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, welcome back to the stream, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been good. Been good to be back and good to be sculpting and good to kind of wrap up that project. And I'm looking forward to figuring out what my next project is. So the next stream, hopefully I'll have a little bit of that thought out. And I think I want to try Unreal 5. I think I want to start getting into Unreal 5. I don't know what I'll do yet, but I think I'll do Unreal 5. Yeah.
Awesome. So. Well, cool, man. Well, thanks for sharing the short. Definitely cool.
We will, whatever platform you're on, like, follow, subscribe so you can see more or get notifications when we go live. But otherwise, we will see you next week, Wednesday, 2 to 5.
All right, everybody.
All right, everybody. Bye.
Later.